This blonde bastard from Konoha just punched a hole through fucking realities, stole Superman's entire planet, and told the Justice League to suck it while claiming they're women. Superboy-Prime Naruto doesn't ask, he takes, he breaks, he builds his harem empire. Did this motherfucker just say he's the real hero now?
The sky above Earth Prime came apart in waves of white light, and a boy named Clark Kent stood in the middle of a dead lawn in a dead neighborhood on a dead world, screaming the name of a girl he would never see again into a void that had already swallowed the sound. Lori. The antimatter wall ate the horizon line first, then the buildings, then the trees, then the ground beneath his feet. And the last thing he saw before everything ended was his own hands glowing with a power he had never asked for, reaching toward a universe that had already decided he was expendable. He died reaching. He died screaming. He died a boy who had been Superman for exactly 11 minutes before the multiverse decided his entire reality was a rough draft. Then he woke up crying in a huddle in a village called Konoha, with red marks on his face and a monster in his stomach, and the complete unbroken memory of everything he had been and everything that had been taken from him. His name in this life was Naruto Uzumaki. His soul remembered a different name. His soul remembered everything. 6 years old. Thrown through the orphanage door hard enough that his shoulder hit the street cobblestones before his feet did. The matron had her face turned away when she did it. Could throw him out but couldn't look at him while she did it. Other children watched from the upstairs windows. A girl with brown pigtails waved goodbye, and the wave was the cruelest part because she meant it kindly. Naruto stood in the street. His shoulder was scraped raw. His belongings fit in one hand because he had one belonging, a stuffed toad with a torn ear that someone had left on his windowsill once when they thought he was sleeping. The mob formed in under 3 minutes. Off-duty Chunin leading the charge, a man with a scar across his nose, and the particular look of someone who had been waiting for permission. Behind him, civilian men carrying torches they had brought from home, which meant they had prepared. Behind them, 2 women whispering the word demon the way other people whisper prayer. Behind them, more, always more. They cornered him in the center of the village plaza. The 4th Hokage's memorial relief stared down from the cliff face above, frozen in stone with a face that looked like Naruto's and a legacy that had made Naruto's life a prison sentence. The first kunai hit his arm. The second hit his ribs. A low-level fire jutsu, barely C rank, the kind of thing academy students practiced on straw dummies, caught the edge of his shirt and burned through the skin. The Chunin with the scar threw a spinning shuriken at his kneecap. Naruto went to his knees. Blood ran down his face from where a rock had opened his forehead. He was 6 years old. He was in the dirt. Grown adults were throwing weapons at a child, and the village that watched did nothing because the village had decided, collectively and irrevocably, that this was acceptable. And then the memories arrived. They came the way a wall of water comes. A single front, moving too fast to outrun, carrying the weight of an entire lifetime in its crest. Earth Prime. Lori Lemon on the porch swing with her hair catching sunlight. His adoptive parents Jerry and Naomi Kent. The day Halley's Comet passed overhead, and his body started doing things that bodies were never supposed to do. The crisis. The antimatter wave. The paradise dimension where Alexander Luthor promised they would be safe, and then trapped them in a pocket reality where they could watch everything and touch nothing. Years of watching heroes he should have fought beside making his world worse and calling it justice. The flashes running him into the Speed Force like a prisoner. The armor. The fights. Superman looking at him with fear instead of recognition. Being written as the villain. Being treated as the monster. Dying with the taste of everyone's betrayal still fresh in his mouth. Everything he was came back in a single second, and the boy in the dirt stopped being a boy. His voice cracked. It was the kind of crack that happens at a specific breaking point, the exact moment between grief and violence, between victim and force of nature. You're ruining everything. He stood up. His knees were steady. His hands were steady. His eyes were doing something the mob had never seen before and would never be able to describe afterward. A kunai flew at his left eye. The Chunin had thrown it with intent, aimed to blind, aimed to maim, thrown at a child's face with full force and zero hesitation. The kunai turned to dust on contact with Naruto's cornea. The metal reached his skin and disintegrated the way paper disintegrates in a furnace. Instant, total, silent. His eye was undamaged. His eye was glowing, red. A red that had zero connection to the Nine Tails. A red older than chakra, older than the Sage of Six Paths, older than the concept of hidden villages. The red of heat vision from a Kryptonian who had run out of patience in 2 lifetimes. No more. He did what he did next without hand seals, without chakra, without anything that the shinobi world had ever categorized or studied or named. He used his body, the body of a Kryptonian soul reborn into an Uzumaki frame, carrying the genetic potential of both lineages in every cell, and he moved at a fraction of light speed. Human eyes could register none of it. What the mob experienced was this. One moment the boy was standing in the center of their circle, and the next moment the circle was empty. The people who had been forming it were gone. Where they had been standing, the cobblestones were red. The air smelled like copper and ozone. 300 meters away, on a rooftop overlooking the plaza, an Anbu agent in a cat mask watched every frame of what had just happened. His Sharingan was active. He was one of the rare non-Uchiha implant carriers, and the Sharingan had tracked part of it. Enough. More than enough. The boy had punched the Chunin first. The man's upper body had converted to red mist before the shockwave of the impact had time to reach the surrounding air. The boy had then moved through the remaining 16, moved through them the way a blade moves through standing wheat, except wheat falls in one direction, and these people had fallen in 17. He had grabbed, struck, pushed, and applied force that the Anbu's implanted eye computed at levels reserved for natural disasters and tailed beast events. The entire thing took under 3 seconds. The Anbu agent sat down on the rooftop tiles. He had filed 1 mission report in 12 years that made him put down his pen and stare at the wall for 40 minutes before he could continue. He already knew this would be the second. In the plaza below, Naruto stood alone. His shirt was burned. His forehead was still bleeding slightly, though as the Anbu watched, the wound was closing at a rate that outpaced even the Nine Tails regeneration factor. The boy looked at his hands. He flexed his fingers. He looked at the sky. Then he looked directly at the Anbu's position on the rooftop, 300 meters away and hidden behind a chakra suppression barrier that should have made him invisible to every detection method known to the shinobi world. The Anbu stopped breathing. Naruto held eye contact for 2 full seconds, then turned and walked away. His steps were even. His breathing was normal. He was 6 years old, and he had just killed 17 people in 3 seconds. And the most terrifying thing about the entire display was how little effort any of it had required. Inside the seal, behind the massive iron gates that held the Nine Tails imprisoned in Naruto's stomach, Kurama felt it happen. The most powerful of all tailed beasts had been sealed inside Jinchuriki before. He had felt their fear, their rage, their pathetic attempts to use his chakra without understanding what they were borrowing. He had been inside Mito Uzumaki, who was strong. He had been inside Kushina Uzumaki, who was fierce. He had existed for centuries as the greatest concentration of chakra in the known world, and in all that time, he had never once felt what he was feeling right now inside this child's body. The boy's cells were doing something that had zero connection to chakra, zero connection to natural energy, zero connection to anything Kurama had encountered in his existence since the Sage of Six Paths had split the 10 tails into 9 pieces and let them loose on the world. Something was happening at the atomic level of this body that operated on principles Kurama's considerable intelligence could identify as power, but could categorize as nothing else. The seal itself, the 4th Hokage's masterwork, the 8 trigrams lock designed to hold Kurama forever, was bending inward. Something on the inside was pressing against the bars with weight that Kurama's 9 tails combined could generate less than 1/10 of. Kurama roared. Instinct. 1,000 years of being the apex predator in every room made the roar automatic. a display, a warning, a declaration of territory. The boy's power responded to the roar through the seal. The response was instantaneous. The seal flared white. The space inside the prison compressed. Kurama felt his entire massive body pressed downward by something that was coming from inside the body he was sealed within. Pressed down the way gravity presses a leaf to the earth, except this gravity had intention behind it, and the intention was absolute. In the space of 1 second, Kurama understood something with a clarity that made his ancient blood run cold. This child could reach through these bars right now and end him with 2 fingers. The math was simple. The math was inarguable. The child's power output exceeded Kurama's full manifestation by a factor that made the comparison embarrassing. Kurama sat down. He put his enormous chin on his enormous crossed paws. His 9 tails went flat against the floor of the seal space. Yes, master. The word came out of the fox the way a white flag comes out of a fortress that has run out of ammunition and options simultaneously. He meant it completely. Every calculation he ran confirmed this was the correct and only answer available to him. Naruto's presence appeared inside the seal space, a projection of the boy standing in front of the gates, looking up at the fox with eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. Good, Naruto said. You're smart. That makes this easier. Kurama, who had terrorized nations and destroyed mountains and fought the Sage of Six Paths himself, pressed his chin lower against his paws and said nothing. Somewhere, in the very back of his ancient consciousness, a thought formed that he would never share with anyone. The most feared entity in the shinobi world had just become a very large, very obedient pet in under 5 seconds. The sheer absurdity of it, the indignity, the cosmic joke of a creature who had spent a millennium terrifying humanity being this thoroughly domesticated by a 6-year-old, registered as something between outrage and inevitability. Both feelings led to the same place: compliance. Your chakra, Naruto said. Full access, on request. You hold nothing back. Understood. The other tail beasts, everything you know about them, locations, Jinchuriki, seal types, weaknesses, you give me everything. I will. Naruto nodded once. He turned to leave the seal space, then paused. He looked back at the fox. When I remake the world, he said, you get a real life, a real body, free, my word. Kurama said nothing for a long time. Then his enormous red eye blinked once, and something in the quality of the light behind it shifted, from terror and submission to something that might, in the right light, from the right angle, have resembled the very first atom of genuine loyalty. I look forward to it, Kurama said. Master. The 3rd Hokage received the Anbu report at midnight. He read it sitting behind his desk in the light of a single lamp with his pipe held between 2 fingers that had stopped moving. He read it once, fast. He read it again, slower. He read it a 3rd time at the pace of a man who is hoping the words will rearrange themselves into a different story. They remained the same. He called in his Anbu captain. 3 questions. The answers came back clear and verified by sharing on recording. The 3rd's pipe went cold in his hand. He sat in his office in a silence that lasted 20 minutes. He had seen war. He had watched the 4th Hokage die, sealing the 9 tails. He had faced Orochimaru, his own student turned monster. He had stared down S-rank threats and survived by the margin of experience and the strength of a will that had earned him the title God of Shinobi. He read this report and understood, with the complete, grounded awareness of a man who has been protecting a village for decades, that whatever lived inside Naruto Uzumaki, the 9 tails was already afraid of it. The decision came together fast because it was the only decision available. Naruto gets an apartment, a stipend, privacy, space. He gets everything on that list, and the list does not include the word confrontation anywhere on it. The 3rd had survived this long by understanding the difference between a threat you can manage and a force you learn to coexist with. He stared at the Anbu report one last time. 17 people, 3 seconds, a 6-year-old child. The 3rd Hokage relit his pipe with a hand that took 2 attempts to hold steady, and filed the report in a drawer that required 2 keys to open and a blood seal to unlock. 7 months later, Naruto found the Uzumaki ruins. The sealed archive sat beneath the 3rd training ground, accessible through a hidden passage behind the waterfall wall, kept locked by the village since the Uzumaki clan's influence had been quietly diminished after Kushina's death, when the alliance became inconvenient for people who preferred the Uzumaki legacy buried alongside the Uzumaki themselves. The seal on the vault door was masterwork. Triple layered, keyed to blood recognition, reinforced with elemental locking protocols that would take a seal master 3 months to dismantle. Naruto pressed his palm against it and the seal dissolved. The blood of an Uzumaki met the lock of an Uzumaki, and the result was inevitable. The door recognized its own. He stepped inside. The archive stretched underground in all directions. Scrolls in climate-sealed racks, stone tablets carved with array foundations, ink samples preserved in vacuum seals, practice grids etched into the floor. The Uzumaki clan's complete accumulated knowledge of Fuinjutsu across 12 generations. Everything Konoha had locked away and never studied, because studying it would mean admitting they had stolen it. Naruto sat down in the center of the archive and began reading. He spent 3 months in that space. His Kryptonian intelligence, the same intelligence that had allowed him in his previous life to build a suit of armor that collected and fed him yellow sun radiation, even under a red sun. Reverse engineering technology from the Anti-Monitor's remains, absorbed in weeks what a human seal master would need decades to comprehend. The Uzumaki texts were brilliant. The clan had understood sealing at a level that treated the art as engineering rather than mysticism. They built frameworks, tested variables, iterated on failures, and documented everything with the rigor of scientists who happened to work in ink and blood. Naruto cross-referenced everything against what he remembered. The Anti-Monitor's armor had solved a specific problem: how to maintain peak Kryptonian power under any solar condition. The armor had been a bulky, external solution. Naruto was going to build the same solution as a Fuinjutsu array: internal, permanent, invisible. He spent 6 weeks designing it. The concept was clean: a sealing array carved into the sternum that absorbs ambient yellow solar radiation continuously, converts it through the Uzumaki chakra system into stored kinetic potential, and maintains that stored energy in a self-sustaining internal matrix. A power source that feeds from inside rather than outside. A seal that makes red sun jutsu, chakra suppressants, power dampening arrays, and every other external limitation irrelevant because there is nothing external left to suppress. He tested it on himself the moment the design was complete. He carved it into his own sternum with a kunai, the blade parting his skin for exactly the time it took to engrave the array before his Kryptonian healing factor closed the wound behind the blade's edge. He felt nothing from the cut. He felt everything from the activation. A hum resonated through his chest wall and radiated outward, a vibration that started in the sternum and expanded in concentric waves, hard enough to shake leaves loose from trees at the perimeter of the third training ground 40 meters away. Birds scattered from branches. A squirrel fell off a trunk and scrambled away. The air around Naruto shimmered the way air shimmers above a heated road. He stood in the center of the training ground. The seal cycled. His Kryptonian cells saturated at a rate he had never achieved in this life. Every mitochondria equivalent pulling yellow solar energy from the seal's internal matrix at maximum throughput, charging, filling, reaching operational levels that made his previous baseline look like running on fumes. He nodded once. The solar storage seal was active. The inner sun was running. He was at full power in any condition, against any suppression, under any colored sun, inside any chakra dampening field, for the rest of his life. The problem Prime had needed alien armor to solve, Naruto had solved with ink, blood, and superior engineering. He told no one. He walked home. He ate 2 bowls of ramen standing at the counter of Ichiraku's, a stall run by a man named Toichi who had served him since the first time Naruto had walked in at age 4 and had never once turned him away. Toichi looked at Naruto's expression while the boy stared at the ceiling between bites and decided, with the instinct of a man who has been feeding people for 30 years, that this was a face you served seconds to without asking and made zero conversation with. Naruto ate. He stared at the ceiling. He ran calculations in his head. Phase 1, complete. The academy was a study in restraint. Naruto understood patience now in a way Prime never had. Prime had made his mistake by showing too much too early, by letting the heroes see him before he was ready, by giving them time to organize, time to run him into the Speed Force, time to write him as the monster before he had the infrastructure to make the label irrelevant. Naruto would make none of those mistakes. He sat in the back row. He answered questions, some correctly, some incorrectly, in a pattern that suggested inconsistent effort rather than deliberate underperformance. He sparred with other students and lost exactly often enough to avoid attention. When Sasuke Uchiha, the class prodigy, the last survivor of the Uchiha massacre, the boy every instructor watched with the hungry eyes of people investing in a future weapon, landed clean strikes in their training bouts, Naruto stood completely still and absorbed the hits. What Sasuke felt when his fist connected was something he wrote off as unusual stamina. The recoil traveled up his arm a little harder than it should have. His knuckles ached for a little longer than they should have after training sessions against Naruto. He attributed this to the Uzumaki bloodline's toughness and filed it under minor annoyance and moved forward. What Sasuke was actually hitting was the equivalent of punching a wall made of something harder than anything in this world had a name for. Every strike that landed on Naruto's body rebounded through the attacker's skeletal structure and told every bone in that arm, in the language that bones understand, that this was a very bad idea to continue. Sasuke's determination overrode the warning. Naruto respected that, in the same way a mountain respects the determination of rain, acknowledgement without concern. Behind Naruto's eyes, while he sat in lectures and sparred at half nothing and let instructors assume he was a dead last talent with good stamina, Batman's analytical framework was running. The analytical mind that had made Prime dangerous even to people who outmatched him in raw power. The ability to read a situation, map its variables, identify every weakness, and build a strategy that exploited all of them simultaneously. He mapped Sasuke's Sharingan trigger conditions. Extreme emotional stress or mortal danger. Naruto tracked the threshold through observation and conversation analysis. He measured Shino Abarame's insect colony through the faint sounds they made at rest and estimated the total count, the chakra sensitivity range, and the response time from threat detection to swarm deployment. He recorded Hinata Hyuga's Byakugan through the academy sparring sessions where she activated it. The range, the coverage angle, and the specific position behind and above her left shoulder, where a 2-degree blind spot existed in the visual sphere. He filed everything. He said nothing. He waited. One moment in the academy years stands separate from the rest. Hinata Hyuga, the Hyuga heiress, the girl who could barely meet her own father's eyes, who walked through the academy corridors like someone trying to take up as little space as the world would allow, was cornered by 3 classmates. Boys who had found her hesitation entertaining the way a certain kind of child finds anything vulnerable entertaining. They were blocking the corridor. They were saying things about her eyes, about her stutter, about her family. Naruto walked up beside her. He did so at normal human pace, with his hands in his pockets, with an expression on his face that contained zero anger and zero warmth and zero anything except a vast, total emptiness that the 3 boys registered in their nervous systems before their conscious minds could name it. He looked at the wall beyond the 3 boys. He did not look at them at all. "You should leave now." His voice was empty in the specific way that a room is empty after everyone in it has decided to be somewhere else, the kind of empty that suggests the space was recently occupied by something dangerous. The 3 boys left. They did so at speed, without looking back, and without discussing among themselves why they were doing it. Their legs carried them away the way legs carry people away from a sound they heard in the wrong place at the wrong time. Naruto walked away without checking on Hinata. He did not look back. He did not ask if she was all right. He continued down the corridor with his hands in his pockets and rounded the corner. Hinata stood in the empty corridor for a full minute before her legs remembered how to carry her. Her heart was hammering. She couldn't explain why. The boys were gone, the threat was over, and Naruto had done nothing except stand beside her and say 4 words. She thought about those 4 words for a week. She thought about the quality of the silence they had produced. She told no one about it. She would think about it again, much later, when he came for her in the Chunin exam stands, and she would understand for the first time what it meant to be under the protection of something that could back its promises with absolute force. Naruto graduated. He attended the minimum required ceremony, collected his headband, and walked home before the group photo. He set the headband on his table, stared at it for a moment, and started planning. Kakashi Hatake arrived 2 hours and 40 minutes late to the meeting point on the roof of the academy building. Sakura had given her speech about Sasuke twice. Sasuke had finished reading a tactical manual and was sitting with his chin on his hand. Naruto was hovering 3 feet off the ground with his arms crossed, staring at the Hokage monument carved into the mountain, hovering. 3 feet off the ground. No chakra output. The Sharingan in Kakashi's left eye. The eye he kept covered. The eye that belonged to Obito Uchiha, who he had lost on that bridge in the rain, registered 0 chakra flow from the floating boy. The kid was airborne through something that was entirely outside the parameters Kakashi's experience could categorize. Kakashi appeared in a swirl of leaves and opened his mouth. He had a line prepared. Something about a black cat in a long road. Naruto spoke without turning around. Hatake Kakashi, Jonin rank, copy ninja, Sharingan in one eye, the one that belongs to Obito Uchiha, who you were too slow to save. You also failed to save Rin Nohara. You copied over 1,000 jutsu and still arrived 2 hours and 40 minutes late to meet the 3 children assigned to your care. The air between them went still. Sakura's mouth was open. Sasuke's hand had dropped from his chin. Naruto turned around. He descended to the ground with a movement that had 0 visible effort behind it. Like gravity was a suggestion he could accept or decline. His eyes were orange. The irises had a faint luminescent quality that made looking at them feel like looking at something very far away and very bright. I've read your mission record. You are weak, Hatake, but you know interesting things. I'll tolerate you. Kakashi's single visible eye held on this 12-year-old for a very long time without blinking. In that time, the Sharingan behind his headband was processing everything it could detect, and what it was detecting was a void. An absolute 0 point in the chakra spectrum where a human body should have been producing something. The boy was a blank. The Sharingan could track tailed beasts across continents by their chakra signature, and it could track exactly nothing from the person standing 5 feet in front of it. Well, Kakashi said, because he had survived 20 years of S-rank missions by knowing when to let a moment pass. Let's all introduce ourselves then. The bell test happened the next morning. Training Ground 7. 2 bells. Kakashi's standard speech about teamwork, about the possibility of going back to the academy, about the importance of coming at him with the intent to kill. When he finished the speech, Naruto was already standing directly in front of him, close enough that Kakashi had to tilt his head up slightly to meet his eyes. The movement from his previous position, 15 meters away, had produced 0 displacement in the air between them. He had simply been there, and then he was here. All right, Naruto said, your turn. Kakashi ran the assessment. He was a professional. He evaluated threats through engagement, and this was an engagement that needed evaluating. He opened with a mid-level combination, 3-point strike to the jugular, the ribs, the knee. The sequence was designed to drop Chunin and give Jonin pause. He executed at full Jonin speed. Naruto caught the first fist in an open palm. The sound was wrong. A fist hitting an open palm should produce a slapping impact noise, flesh on flesh, kinetic energy distributing through both surfaces. This sound was the sound of something hitting a surface so dense that the kinetic energy had nowhere to go except back through the striking limb. Every bone in Kakashi's right hand fractured simultaneously. The pain arrived a quarter second behind the impact. A cascade of signals from 27 individual bones telling his brain that all of them had given up at the same moment. Kakashi pulled back in the half second before the hand went fully numb, already recalibrating at the speed that had kept him alive through engagements with Zabuza, with Itachi's genjutsu, with Pain's projections. He had copied over 1,000 jutsu. He had felt the impact signatures of every fighting style the 5 nations had produced. He had taken hits from A-rank criminals and S-rank missing nin, and once from a partially manifested tailed beast. He had never felt anything like what he had just felt from a 12-year-old's open palm. Naruto reached over and took both bells off Kakashi's belt with 2 fingers. The motion was economical and unhurried. The motion of a person picking up something they left on a counter, something that belonged to them already. He held 1 bell in each hand. He let them ring once, a clear, sweet sound that sat in absurd contrast against the reality of what had just happened to Kakashi's hand. He threw 1 bell to Sasuke. He threw the other to Sakura. He did both without looking at either of them. Both bells arrived in their hands with a gentle arc that required 0 adjustment to catch. The lesson is teamwork, Naruto told Kakashi. I understand, but I want to be clear about something. He put his hands in his pockets. His posture shifted into something that communicated a truth more clearly than his words. He was done. The test in his mind had ended the moment it began. Everything since had been a courtesy. I'm here because this world has a path I need to walk, and walking it requires a team as cover. When the team is in danger, I will evaluate whether saving them serves the mission. If it does, I'll save them. If it teaches them something they need to learn, I'll watch. He turned and walked off the training ground. Sakura was staring. Sasuke was staring. Kakashi was holding his fractured hand against his chest, with his functional one, and his single visible eye was doing something it had done fewer than 10 times in 20 years of service, processing genuine uncertainty about the future. You should put that hand in ice, Naruto said without looking back. He cleared the tree line and was gone. Behind him, 3 people stood in a training ground that felt emptier than it should have, dealing with the specific silence that fills a space after something enormous has passed through it and moved on. The Team 7 dynamic settled into its shape fast. Naruto did not pretend to invest in Sasuke's revenge arc. When the subject came up, when Sasuke, during a mission rest stop, explained the Uchiha massacre in the way that boys who have made trauma their entire identity explain trauma. With intensity, with the need to be taken seriously, with the unspoken demand for recognition, Naruto listened to every word. His expression throughout was the expression of a person waiting for a presentation to reach its conclusion slide. When Sasuke finished, Naruto spoke. So your brother killed your entire clan, and you want to kill him in return. That's your whole goal. Everything you are is pointed at one person. Sasuke's jaw tightened, his fists closed. Pick a bigger target, Naruto said. He was looking at the sky while he said it, which made the advice land harder because it communicated that he was giving it idly without effort, the way a person comments on weather. Revenge is for extras. It's a supporting character's entire arc. You are wasting a Sharingan on a plot that ends with you dying satisfied and having accomplished nothing lasting. Sasuke's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Rage, offense, and then, buried under both, visible for only a moment, consideration. The consideration disappeared under the rage fast enough that anyone watching would have missed it. Naruto saw it. Naruto saw everything. On missions, the team grew at a rate that surprised Kakashi. Naruto did not carry them. He did not protect Sakura from engagement she could survive by solving the problem herself, even when solving the problem herself meant bleeding, meant fear, meant spending 10 terrible seconds believing she was going to die before her training kicked in and she found the opening. He did not shield Sasuke from opponents who were stronger than him. He watched, evaluated, and acted only when the situation crossed the threshold between useful difficulty and actual terminal danger. The result was a team that developed instincts other Genin teams never built. The safety net was real, genuinely real, backed by a power that nothing in this world could threaten, but it was never automatic. And both Sasuke and Sakura learned the difference between the moments when Naruto would move and the moments when he would only watch, and that learning made them stronger faster than any other training method could have. Kakashi watched this happen across the weeks with a feeling he could only describe as discomfort. The boy was training his team the way a general trains soldiers, through controlled exposure to real consequence. It was working. It should have been deeply concerning that a 12-year-old understood this method at all. The forest of death opened its gates and swallowed 60 Genin teams into its canopy. Team 7 entered at Gate 12. Naruto kept his power at 0 output for the first full day, a choice he made every second of, like holding his breath underwater when breathing was an option. He wanted to watch the other teams work. He wanted to read the forest the way he read a room. Map the threats, identify the players, understand who was a tool and who was a variable. His eyes tracked movements in the canopy. His hearing, Kryptonian hearing, active at all times regardless of power output, picked up conversations from 3 kilometers away. He heard Gaara kill a team from Rain in 30 seconds and file their scroll without comment. He heard Kabuto Yakushi whispering to an Otojinin in a voice that carried allegiance to someone who was present in this forest and should have had 0 reason to be. Orochimaru found them on day 2. The separation was instant, a jutsu that hit the ground between Naruto and his teammates and erupted into a wall of purple flame that forced them apart. Sasuke and Sakura went north. Naruto stayed in the clearing. The purple flame died. Orochimaru stood across from him in the dappled light. The Sannin, the snake, the man who had experimented on children, who had abandoned his village, who had been studying immortality through body theft for decades, and had arrived at this forest for one specific prize, Sasuke's Sharingan eyes. He opened with killing intent. The technique was real. S-rank killing intent from a former student of the 3rd Hokage, amplified by 40 years of accumulated combat experience and the particular quality of menace that belongs to someone who has tortured people as an academic exercise. The intent hit the clearing like a pressure wave. Trees in a 30-meter radius bent under it. Every animal in range went still. Birds dropped from branches. Insects stopped their sounds. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Naruto stood in the center of it and looked at Orochimaru with mild interest. The killing intent washed over him the way a breeze washes over a cliff face. Registered, irrelevant, already forgotten. "You've got a good poker face," Naruto said, "but the edges of your chakra are doing something interesting right now. You felt something like me before, and you survived by getting out of its way in time." Orochimaru's smile held. It was a good smile. The kind of smile that had been practiced in front of countless victims and refined into something that communicated threat without moving a single muscle. He doubled the killing intent. The combined weight of both waves hit Naruto from all sides. Naruto yawned. He covered his mouth with one hand and blinked once, the way a person yawns in a meeting that has gone 15 minutes too long. The yawn was real. His body was relaxed. His heart rate, had anyone been close enough to hear it, was at resting levels. You want Sasuke's eyes. You want to live forever. You've been body hopping for so long, you've forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. He tilted his head. The movement was small and carried something in it that made the air between them change quality. "I'll remind you." His eyes glowed red. The heat vision did not fire. The pre-activation wash, that initial burst of light from a Kryptonian's visual cortex charging the optic cells with solar energy in preparation for release, illuminated his face in a red-gold light that turned the shadows behind him into something that stretched wrong. The air between them heated. The leaves on the nearest tree curled inward. Moisture in the atmosphere within 10 meters evaporated instantly, creating a visible distortion field that warped the light passing through it. The trees at the edge of the clearing leaned away from him. Their trunks bent outward. Their roots shifted in the soil. Living things responding to the presence of something their biology identified, on a level below conscious thought, as a force that made survival contingent on distance. Orochimaru's smile did not change. His hand went into his coat, withdrew the earth scroll, and set it on the ground between them. Then the Sannin retreated. The movement was smooth and unhurried, and carried exactly the kind of false composure that belongs to a person who has just recalculated their entire approach to a situation inside of 3 seconds. He sank into the ground via substitution and was gone, leaving nothing behind except the scroll and the faintest smell of snakeskin in the humid air. Naruto picked up the scroll. He looked at the spot where Orochimaru had been standing. He knew the Sannin was still nearby. His hearing could track the man's heartbeat moving through the underground passage, and he knew the Sannin was filing him under a very short list. Good. Let him file. By the time Orochimaru finished his research and decided he was ready to engage, Naruto intended to be gone from this world entirely. Team 7 walked out of the Forest of Death 12 hours ahead of the deadline with both scrolls and 0 injuries. The proctors made a note of this. Several proctors made several notes. The preliminary round arena smelled like sweat and disinfectant and anticipation. Genin from all 5 major villages lined the upper gallery, watching the electronic board spin names at random. The Hokage observed from the elevated platform. Jonin Sensei stood at the railings. The room hummed with the particular energy of young people about to watch other young people bleed for advancement. The board spun. It stopped. Naruto Uzumaki versus Kiba Inuzuka. Kiba grinned. He cracked his knuckles. He looked at Akamaru, who barked once. He jumped down to the arena floor with the energy of someone who has already decided the outcome and is showing up to collect. Naruto descended from the railing, floated down, more accurately, touching the arena floor without the sound of impact, without the bend of knees absorbing a landing. He simply arrived at ground level the way a leaf arrives at the surface of a lake. "All right, dead last," Kiba said, rolling his shoulders. "I've been wanting this. Everyone knows you're the weakest genin in the class. Akamaru and I are going to put you down so fast the proctor won't have time to call it." Naruto stood still. He looked at Kiba the way a person looks at a television program they are about to change the channel on. "Are you done talking?" Kiba was absolutely not done talking. He had 3 more sentences prepared, involving words like loser and joke, and a comparison to a training dummy that he had workshopped with Akamaru the night before. But something in the way Naruto asked the question, the tone, the posture, the absolute absence of anything resembling defensiveness, cut the remaining sentences off at the root. Kiba activated human-beast transformation. Akamaru leaped to his back, their chakra systems merging, their bodies aligning into the combat configuration the Inuzuka clan had developed over generations. Their combined speed tripled. Their tracking instincts merged into a single unified combat intelligence. Fang over fang. The attack launched. Twin rotation drills, Kiba and Akamaru spinning in tandem at speeds that generated visible wind spirals, their enhanced bodies becoming living projectiles aimed dead center at Naruto's chest. The technique hit harder and faster than standard tracking vision could follow. It had taken down opponents twice Kiba's rank. Naruto put his hands in his pockets. Fang over fang connected. The sound was wrong. Impact against flesh should produce a specific set of audio frequencies, the compression of muscle, the displacement of air, the kinetic transfer from one body to another. This sound was the sound of a power drill connecting with a concrete support column and accomplishing nothing except damage to itself. Kiba and Akamaru rebounded. The rotation carried them back, spun them around, and they came in for another pass. Same result. The technique connected with Naruto's body, and the body refused to register the hit as relevant. They bounced back. They came again. Again. 37 consecutive impacts, each one driven by increasing desperation and the mounting awareness that something was fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong with what was happening. Kiba's arms had passed through aching and arrived at a bone-deep vibration that his nervous system was interpreting as a warning signal, the kind of signal that comes before a bone gives up and breaks. Each impact drove the full force of the attack back through the attacker's body instead of through the target's. Naruto had a small red mark on one cheek. As the arena watched, the mark faded. The healing factor erased it in under 2 seconds. Kiba landed. He was breathing hard. His arms were shaking. Akamaru had separated from the transformation and was sitting behind Kiba with both ears flat against his skull. The dog's instincts had identified what was in front of them, and the dog wanted to be somewhere else entirely. Naruto took his hands out of his pockets. My turn. He walked forward at a completely normal human pace. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. He reached Kiba in the time it takes to cross a room, grabbed him by the ankle with one hand, lifted him overhead like a person lifting a book off a shelf, and brought him down onto the arena floor. The impact was a physical event that the entire building felt. The floor of the arena, reinforced concrete designed to survive Jonin-level training exercises, cratered beneath Kiba's body in a circular depression 3 meters wide. The shockwave traveled through the building's foundations and was felt on the upper gallery as a vibration through the feet. Every mechanism in the room was already moving before the dust cleared. Kiba was alive. Every bone in his body was broken, but he was alive. The precision of the impact was the kind that stops at exactly the threshold between catastrophic injury and fatality. Naruto had brought him down with enough force to end the fight in a way that everyone in this room would remember for the rest of their careers, and had stopped at the exact point that kept the damage survivable. He stepped back. He was looking at the ceiling, already gone from this scene in his mind. The audience in the gallery saw a boy who had just destroyed another genin without moving faster than a walk, and his expression was the expression of someone thinking about what he was going to eat later. The arena was silent for a full 2 seconds. Then 3 things happened at the same time. The proctor called the match with a voice that was trying very hard to maintain professional composure and managing about 60% of that goal. A genin from sand, a boy with face paint, and a puppeteer's string calluses, dropped his senbon into his lap and forgot to retrieve them. And in the stands, Might Guy put one hand on Rock Lee's shoulder and spoke in a voice pitched so low that even the people standing directly beside them couldn't hear it. Rock Lee's eyes were very wide. His mouth was very closed. The usual fire in his expression, the determination, the promise that hard work could overcome anything, had gone somewhere else for a moment. Guy's hand stayed on his shoulder until it came back. In the medical bay below, the staff received Kiba's unconscious body and began a damage assessment that would take 4 hours and require 6 specialists. One of the junior medics, while cataloging fracture locations, stopped and set down her clipboard and said to her colleague, "All of them, every single one, in a single impact." Her colleague said nothing. Her colleague had been a field medic in the Third Shinobi War and thought she had seen everything the human body could endure. She was revising that assumption. The board spun again. It stopped. Naruto Uzumaki versus Neji Hyugan. Neji descended to the arena floor with the poise of someone who has been told he is a genius his entire life and has found 0 evidence to contradict the assessment. He was elegant. He was composed. His Byakugan eyes carried the quiet confidence of a bloodline that had dominated the shinobi world's close combat landscape for centuries. He spoke. He gave the destiny speech, his personal philosophy, refined through years of resentment and loss, and the specific bitterness of a child branded with a seal that made him less than his family despite being better than all of them. He believed every word. He had earned the belief through genuine suffering. The caged bird seal on his forehead was proof of a system that had crushed him, and his philosophy about fate was the framework he had built to survive that crushing. "Fate decided the outcome of this fight before we were born," Neji said. "A failure cannot defeat a genius. That is the truth of this world, and fighting against it only delays the inevitable." Naruto looked at him with patience. Real patience. The kind that comes from having read every version of this argument across multiple lifetimes and found all of them wanting. Destiny is a story written by people too afraid to admit they're making it up as they go. I've been in those stories. I've read them. They fall apart the moment someone in them stops obeying the script. Neji activated his Byakugan. The veins around his eyes bulged. His field of vision expanded to 360 degrees, penetrating solid matter, tracking chakra signatures at range. He dropped into the 8 trigram stance, the foundation of the Hyuga combat style, designed to close tenketsu points and shut down an opponent's chakra system through 64 strikes delivered in ascending sequence. In the stands, the Hyuga elders allowed themselves a small, contained pride. This was their prodigy, their weapon. The living proof that the branch family's purpose was to serve, and the main family's purpose was to rule. Naruto moved. The Byakugan, the eye technique that had never missed a movement in the history of the Hyuga clan, registered nothing. One frame Neji was in his stance. The next frame Naruto was standing directly behind him with 2 fingers raised at the base of Neji's skull. Neji's Byakugan was active. It should have seen Naruto move. It was literally designed to see everything within its range, regardless of speed or angle. It saw nothing. Because Naruto had moved using zero chakra, generating zero detectable energy signature at a speed that the Byakugan's processing capabilities simply could not track, the eye requires a chakra trace to follow, and there was none. He was invisible to the very technique designed to make invisibility impossible. Naruto fired a thread-focused beam of heat vision at the lowest possible output, a hair-thin line of concentrated solar energy targeted at the specific neural cluster connecting Neji's brain to the Byakugan's optic processing pathway. The beam entered through the skin at the base of the skull, traveled 7 millimeters, found the target cluster, and burned it out. The operation took less than 1/10 of a second. The entry point left no visible wound. Neji screamed. His hands went to his face. The Byakugan went black. The eyes remained physically intact, undamaged, still carrying the Hyuga bloodline's distinctive pale iris. But the neural bridge that connected those eyes to the brain's visual cortex was gone, severed at the source. The Byakugan was disconnected from every pathway that had made it function. Neji dropped to his knees. He was sighted. His regular vision worked fine. But the Kekkei Genkai was gone, as if it had never existed. The arena went so silent that the sound of Neji's knees hitting the floor echoed off both walls. Naruto looked at Neji's forehead. He looked at the caged bird seal, the mark pressed into the skin of every branch member from childhood, a control mechanism that allowed the main family to cause debilitating pain at will, to kill at will, to enforce a hierarchy of slavery within their own bloodline and call it tradition. He had studied this seal for 3 years in the Uzumaki archive. He had designed the counter for it during his 2nd year at the academy. He ran 3 hand signs. The chakra was minimal. Uzumaki grade Fuinjutsu required almost nothing from the user because the seal structures did the work through their own architecture. The counterlock engaged. The caged bird seal on Neji's forehead glowed bright white, then faded, then disappeared. The skin beneath was clean. Naruto held up his hand. Between his fingers, a tiny seal array glowed for a moment before dispersing. The caged bird seal, extracted intact, removed from Neji's forehead as cleanly as a sticker being peeled off glass. He turned. He found the Hyuga section of the stands across the distance. He found Hiyashi Hyuga's eyes, the clan head, the man who bore ultimate responsibility for the seal's existence and its use, and held them. Your clan brands its own family. I want you to think about that very carefully while I take the 2 girls you've been training. The silence in the arena reached a new depth. The kind of silence that happens when a room full of people realize simultaneously that they are watching something they will be telling other people about for decades. Naruto walked off the arena floor. He walked up the stairs to the gallery. He walked past rows of frozen genin and their frozen jonin sensei and stopped in front of Hinata Hyuga. She was standing beside her father. Her younger sister Hanabi stood on Hiyashi's other side, 8 years old, already being groomed to replace Hinata as heiress because Hiyashi had decided his older daughter was too weak for the role. Both girls were looking at Naruto with expressions that shared components but diverged in crucial ways. Hinata's held recognition and something that had been building since that empty corridor 3 years ago. Hanabi's held assessment and the complete absence of fear that belongs to a child who has been raised to evaluate power rather than recoil from it. Naruto looked at them both for exactly long enough to make clear this was an offer and a promise delivered simultaneously. You are under my protection. Come. He turned and walked back toward the arena floor. The proctor had forgotten his job existed. Several jonin in the gallery had hands on weapons they had grabbed from pure reflex and were now holding without any idea what they planned to do with them. After a pause that ran for several very long seconds, a pause during which both girls looked at each other, looked at their father, looked at the boy walking away, and made a decision that would rewrite the next decade of their lives, Hinata rose from her seat. A heartbeat later, Hanabi rose from hers. They followed. The Hyuga elders came out of their seats. 3 of them, old men with old privileges and the old certainty that their bloodline's internal hierarchy was inviolable. Hiyashi Hyuga's hand went to the handle of his blade, an heirloom weapon that had sat at his hip through 2 wars, that had killed S-rank threats, that represented the authority of the Hyuga main branch across 12 generations. Naruto glanced over his shoulder without slowing his pace. His eyes carried the heat vision glow at its very minimum setting. A flash of red gold in the irises, there and gone in under a second. The temperature in the immediate area around the Hyuga section of the stands rose by 4 degrees. Touch that blade and Konoha wakes up tomorrow without a Hyuga clan. The words were spoken in a conversational tone. They contained zero emphasis. They were delivered the way a person delivers a statement of observable fact. The sky is blue, water is wet. This clan ceases to exist if that blade clears its sheath. Hiyashi Hyuga sat down. His hand left the blade. His face went through several processes in rapid sequence and arrived at stillness. The kind of stillness that belongs to a person who has just been forced to acknowledge a truth about power differential that rewrites everything they believed about their position in the world. He would spend the next 3 weeks trying to decide what the correct response was in that moment. He would keep arriving at the same answer, the one he made. The proctor called the match. His voice was steady. It was the most impressive acting performance of his career. In the gallery, the third Hokage's pipe had gone cold in his hand for the second time in his life because of Naruto Uzumaki. He looked at the boy walking across the arena floor with 2 Hyuga heiresses following him. And the thought that formed was the same thought he'd had 6 years ago in his office at midnight. Whatever this is, my village must learn to coexist with it. Because the alternative is a crater where Konoha used to be. Between the preliminary rounds and the Chunin finals, Naruto disappeared for 36 hours. He told nobody. He left no message, no trail, no detectable chakra signature. Anbu tracked him to the village gate and lost him the moment he passed it. The boy moved at a speed and altitude that placed him beyond every detection method the village possessed. He returned 36 hours later with a dent in his headband and a faint scorch mark along his left shoulder that was already healed over by the time anyone saw it. He filed 0 reports. He attended the next team training session on time. Kakashi asked him where he had been in a voice designed to sound idle and landed somewhere closer to apprehensive. Naruto said, "Out." Kakashi did not ask again. Where Naruto had actually been, he flew to the land of Earth at a speed that generated a sonic boom above the forest line, rattling windows in 3 Fire Country border towns simultaneously, and waking a farmer in a village 40 kilometers south of the blast corridor, who would tell the story of the sky cracking open above his field for the next 20 years. He came in from above Iwagakure through the cloud cover, straight down. Terminal velocity exceeded in under a second and continuing to accelerate beyond it. The Tsuchikage, Onoki, the fence-sitter, a man who had fought in 2 shinobi wars and survived by being the most pragmatic leader in the 5 nations, was informed by his sensor core 30 seconds before Naruto cleared the cloud line. The report was terse. Unidentified chakra signature, approaching from high altitude, speed exceeding measurement parameters, power output exceeding measurement parameters. Onoki was airborne in 10 seconds. He was a pragmatic man. He had seen tailed beasts on a battlefield. He had made calculations about acceptable losses and come out on the correct side of those calculations for 50 years. He looked at the readings his sensor core was producing and authorized the village's absolute trump card without hesitation. Particle style, atomic dismantling jutsu. The technique fired from Onoki's hands at 5,000 meters altitude, a cube of intersecting energy planes that reduced anything they contained to its base components, erasing matter at the submolecular level. The ultimate jutsu of the Tsuchikage lineage. The technique that had killed more S-rank threats than any other single jutsu in the history of the 5 nations. It had never failed. In 50 years of use, against every category of target from human to tailed beast manifestation, it had never once failed to erase what it was aimed at. The beam hit Naruto dead center. Onoki watched through his viewing crystal for the confirmation. The cube enveloped the target. The energy planes began their work, dismantling matter at the atomic level, separating molecular bonds, reducing solid mass to component particles. The crystal cleared. Naruto was still there. He was walking through the technique, his body passing through the cube's kill zone at a steady pace, cells regenerating faster than the particle style could dismantle them. The atomic erasure found his Kryptonian biology and met a regeneration factor powered by the inner sun's continuous output. For every cell the technique dismantled, 14 new cells formed from the solar energy reservoir before the original cell had finished coming apart. The particle style was losing a race it had never been in before. Naruto looked down at the beam hitting his chest with the expression of a person who has walked into a light drizzle they expected to be heavier. Mild inconvenience. Zero concern. He cleared the cube's range and descended. He touched down on the village floor, boots meeting stone, a sound that carried in the sudden silence of a village whose absolute trump card had just been demonstrated as irrelevant. "You attacked me first," Naruto said. He looked up at the Tsuchikage's tower, then at the guards arranged in formation around the village center, then at the civilian streets branching outward. His eyes tracked everything. His expression remained the same, waiting. Patient in the way that patient people are patient when the thing they're waiting for is already certain. I want everyone here to remember that. He pulled his fist back. He loaded every available joule of the inner sun's accumulated reserve into the kinetic framework of a single strike. The solar storage seal flared visible on his chest through his shirt, a complex array of golden lines pulsing with contained solar energy being channeled into one point, one purpose, one fist. He drove his fist downward into the bedrock of Iwagakure. Infinite mass punch. An object moving at a meaningful fraction of light speed generates mass that scales exponentially with velocity. This is physics, real physics, the kind that exists regardless of whether a world uses chakra or ki or any other fantasy energy system. Naruto's fist, at that speed, impacted the Earth with the effective mass of a small moon, concentrating its entire gravitational weight into a space the size of a human knuckle. The impact traveled through the continental shelf in both directions simultaneously. What happened to Iwagakure cannot be described as destruction, because destruction implies a process that takes time. This was instantaneous replacement. One moment a village existed in this location, and the next moment a crater existed instead. The shock wave expanded outward from the impact point at hypersonic speed. The mountain range surrounding the village dropped by 4 meters across its entire length as the tectonic plate beneath it buckled downward. The air above the impact point superheated and expanded so fast it produced a secondary shock wave that stripped leaves from trees 60 kilometers away. The crater that replaced Iwagakure was so large and so deep that cartographers in the land of Earth would spend the next decade redrawing maps. It would change the weather patterns in the region. Rivers that had flowed south would flow east. A lake would form in the lowest point of the crater within 5 years. The geography of the land of Earth was permanently, irrevocably different. Naruto floated above the center of the new crater. He looked down at it. He looked at his fist, unmarked, undamaged, the knuckles carrying zero evidence of what they had just done. He nodded once, the way a person nods when they have confirmed something they already knew. He flew northeast. 300 kilometers behind him, in a fire country border town, a farmer looked at the horizon where a dust cloud was rising higher than any dust cloud had ever risen in the recorded history of his nation, and said to his wife, "Something happened." The Tsuchikage was never found. His censor corps, the ones who had been stationed outside the village perimeter during the strike, would spend the rest of their careers providing testimony to international tribunals about what they had witnessed. Their accounts would be consistent, detailed, and universally disbelieved until satellite imagery from the land of Earth's geographic survey confirmed the crater's existence and dimensions. The Raikage received word before Naruto arrived. The censor corps of Kumogakure had standing orders to flag any energy signature above a certain threshold within their detection range. Naruto's approach lit up every alarm in the system simultaneously. The fourth Raikage, the fastest shinobi in the 5 nations, the man who had never flinched from any fight in his life, took position on the mountain peak outside his village. Behind him, Killer Bee, his brother, the Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails, already mid-verse about the situation. Behind them, 20 of Kumo's finest jonin, arranged in defensive formation, hands on weapons, eyes on the sky. Naruto descended from altitude with zero urgency. He landed on the mountain peak 10 meters from the Raikage and stood there with his arms at his sides. The white aura that surrounded him when his power was cycling at high output illuminated the mountain face and cast the assembled Jonin's shadows behind them in sharp relief. The Raikage was flinching. It was the smallest possible version of a flinch, a micro movement in his left shoulder, a fractional increase in the tension of his jaw. And he knew it was happening, and he hated it with a fury that was directed almost entirely at himself. He was fourth Raikage of Kumogakure. He did not flinch, but his body, which had survived 3 decades of combat by trusting its own danger assessment, was telling him something his mind refused to process. "You destroyed Iwa," the Raikage said. "Yes." "Why are you here?" "The 8 tails. And your women," the Raikage charged. His lightning release armor activated at full output, electricity coating his entire body in a shell of accelerated reflexes and amplified speed that made him the fastest raw movement combatant the human body had ever produced in the 5 nations. He became a living thunderbolt. The distance between them, 10 meters, closed in a time interval too small for human perception to process. His fist drove forward at the apex of the charge with the full momentum of 80 kilograms of enhanced muscle moving at beyond lightning speed. Naruto extended one hand. Fingers spread, palm open. He caught the punch. The impact produced a pressure wave that expanded outward in all directions from the contact point. 3 of the 20 guards behind the Raikage left their feet and traveled backward. The stone beneath Naruto's boots cracked in a radial pattern. The sound was a crack of compressed air that echoed off the mountain face and came back as a secondary report. Naruto stood completely still. His arm was extended. His palm held the Raikage's fist the way a person holds a ball that has been thrown to them, accepting the momentum, containing it, finding zero difficulty in either action. He wrapped his hand around the Raikage's wrist. "You have a good punch," Naruto said. His voice was conversational, genuine. The compliment was real. It was the strongest physical strike any human being had ever delivered to his body in this world, and he was acknowledging it the way a senior practitioner acknowledges a junior one's best effort. "You're the strongest man in this village." He broke the Raikage's neck. The motion was fast and targeted. Enough rotational force applied to the cervical vertebrae to produce instant incapacitation calculated to a degree of accuracy that stopped the force precisely before the threshold of permanent spinal damage. The nerve disruption was total. The bone damage was non-fatal. The Raikage dropped. The lightning release armor flickered and died, the body going limp from the 3rd vertebra down, consciousness departing before the body finished falling. Naruto stepped over him without looking down. Killer Bee was already in version 2. The 8 tails partially manifested through his back, 8 tentacles of pure Biju chakra extending from his body like wings made of violet-black energy. He was mid-rap, and the rap was actually decent. Something about uninvited guests and what happens to people who touch his brother. His combat instincts were exceptional. His speed in this form was well beyond Jonin level. Naruto intercepted him. B got zero clean look at the movement. One frame he was charging. The next frame, an open palm was buried in his solar plexus, and the 8 tails transformation was collapsing around him, like a building losing its structural supports from the inside out. The Biju chakra dispersed. The tentacles retracted. B's body left the ground, traveling backward, bounced twice across the mountain peak, and came to rest against a boulder 30 meters away. He was breathing. He was unconscious. He would be fine. He would be rapping about this encounter for the rest of his natural life, and the verse he would eventually write about it would become the most popular song in the Land of Lightning for 3 consecutive months. Naruto raised his left arm. He pulled back his sleeve. The 8 tails extraction seal was visible on his forearm, an Uzumaki-grade storage array designed during his academy years, engineered to interface with a specific Biju signature and separate it from its host without killing either entity. He had built 9 of them. Each one was keyed to a different tailed beast. He activated the seal. The array glowed gold. The 8 tails chakra, still lingering in B's network, confused and disoriented from the forced demanifestation, responded to the seal's pull. 4 seconds. The extraction was smooth, painless for the host, and complete. The Eight Tails joined Kurama in Naruto's seal network, settling into its designated storage space with the bewildered energy of an ancient being that had just been moved from one container to another without its consent or comprehension. Inside the seal space, Kurama looked at the Eight Tails and offered a single comment: "Welcome. It gets easier." Naruto turned to the remaining guards. 17 of them were still standing. 3 had been blown off the mountain by the pressure wave and were presumably clinging to the cliff face below. The 17 who remained had backed to the edge of the peak. Several had dropped their weapons. One had sat down because his legs had made a decision his brain hadn't caught up with yet. Samui, Mabui, Fu, Yugito, Tamari of Suna. I'll get to her next. He listed the names evenly, the way a person reads a roster. Every woman I just named is under my protection from this moment forward. They are free to come with me immediately and free to think it over. But when they decide, I'll be easy to find. He looked at the Raikage's unconscious body. Send medics. He'll recover. He lifted off the mountain peak and flew south. The guards watched him go. Nobody spoke for a full minute after he disappeared above the cloud line. The guard who had sat down remained sitting. He would be found there 2 hours later by the relief shift, still staring at the sky, still trying to assemble what he had witnessed into a narrative that made sense. Samui received the news from a runner. She was in the training hall when the messenger arrived. Blade in hand, mid-form, her combat stance frozen in place as the runner delivered the account in a voice that kept cracking at the important parts. She asked 2 questions. Is the Raikage alive? Yes. Did B survive? Yes, she sheathed her blade. She asked a 3rd question. What did he want from me, specifically? The runner repeated Naruto's words. Samui listened with her face giving away nothing. A lifetime of service in Kumo's intelligence division had trained expression out of her the way other training programs trained weakness out of their students. She stood in the training hall for a long time after the runner left. She thought about what she had been told. She thought about the words, "under my protection." She thought about the demonstrated capability that backed those words. A man who had destroyed Iwagakure with a single punch and defeated the Raikage in 2 seconds was offering protection, which meant protection from him was absolute protection from everything. She packed a bag. It took her 10 minutes. She traveled light because she always traveled light. At the village gate, the guard asked where she was going. She said, "Out." The guard, who had been briefed on the mountain incident, chose with admirable survival instincts to make 0 further inquiries. Mobui requested the full incident report. She was Kumo's chief intelligence analyst, the woman who processed every piece of information that crossed the Raikage's desk before it reached him. She was thorough. She was brilliant. She did not make decisions without data. She read the report cover to cover. She read the sensor readings from the approach. She read the accounts from the 17 surviving guards. She read the damage assessment of the Raikage's cervical vertebrae, broken but repairable, incapacitating but survivable. She set the report down. He had the force to level everything, she said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were distant with the particular look of a person whose analytical mind has just produced a conclusion that her emotional mind is still catching up to. He leveled only Iwa. She sat with the difference between those 2 sentences. The gap between capability and action. The space between what he could have done to Kumo, the same thing he did to the village made of stone, and what he chose to do instead. He had come here for specific things. He took the 8 tails and delivered a message. He left the village standing. He left its people alive. He left the Raikage breathing. She packed a bag. Fu found him first. She appeared in front of him above the land of waterfalls, flying under her own power, the 7 tails of chakra wings manifesting from her back in iridescent green, her orange eyes catching the sunlight as she held position in the air and looked at him directly. She was young, his age, roughly. She had been the Jinchuriki of the 7 tails since birth. She had been treated as a weapon by her village since she was old enough to understand what the word meant. She was grinning. "You're collecting us? The Jinchuriki." Naruto inclined his head slightly. The acknowledgement was minimal and respectful. He recognized a peer approaching, which was a recognition he offered to very few people in any context. "Did you kill the Eight Tails host?" Her voice carried the question with genuine weight. She cared about the answer. Jinchuriki had a solidarity that crossed village lines. They understood each other's lives in ways that their respective villages never would. Killer Bee is alive and will recover fully. She held eye contact for 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, she read something in his face that satisfied a question she hadn't asked out loud. Some confirmation about his intentions, his sincerity, the gap between what he was and how he treated others like himself. Okay. She pulled into formation at his left side and said nothing else. They flew together in silence for a while. 2 Jinchuriki in the open sky above the cloud line, the world spread beneath them like a map they were both about to rewrite. Inside Naruto's SEAL network, the 7 Tails reached out toward Kurama. Kurama told it the same thing he had told the 8 Tails. "It gets easier." He was beginning to sound like a receptionist. Yugito Ni was the hardest recruitment. She pushed back. She sat across from Naruto in a field outside Kumogakure, with her arms crossed and her 2 Tails Jinchuriki markings catching the afternoon light. And she made her arguments with the full conviction of a person who has genuine loyalty to a village that treated her better than most Jinchuriki got treated. "I have a position here. I have a rank. I have people who depend on me." Her voice was strong. "Kumo took me in as a weapon, but they also raised me. They trained me. They gave me purpose." Naruto listened to every word. He sat cross-legged in the grass with his hands resting on his knees and let her make every argument at full length without interruption. His expression carried zero impatience and zero dismissal. He was genuinely hearing her, which was itself unusual enough that Yugito noticed it and almost stumbled over her next sentence because of it. She talked for 10 minutes. She laid out her case for staying, for loyalty, for the life she had built inside a system that she acknowledged was imperfect but belonged to her. When she finished, Naruto spoke. "I know what it's like to carry a beast that your village uses to define you. I know what it's like to have your entire identity decided by something that was done to you before you had a choice. Every word you just said, I lived that for 6 years before I decided to stop." He stood up. The grass around where he had been sitting was slightly depressed. His weight, even at rest, was something the earth noticed. "I'm building something real. When you're ready." He left. He did so without pressure, without a deadline, without the implication that her refusal would carry consequences. The offer was clean. The departure was clean. She followed him 3 days later. She found him at a waypoint in the Land of Fire, a clearing he was using as a temporary base, surrounded by the others who had already gathered. She walked into the clearing, looked at the group assembled there, looked at Naruto, and nodded once. She would never confirm out loud that the speech was what did it. But every person in that clearing who looked at her face when she arrived understood. She had spent 3 days trying to find a flaw in what he'd said, and she had come up empty. Tamari of Suna required a different approach because Tamari was a different kind of person entirely. Naruto sent a message through Suna's gate, a formal request to speak, addressed to her by name, delivered by a shadow clone that appeared from empty air in front of the gate guards and handed them a scroll before dissolving. The scroll was brief. "Tamari of the Sand, I would speak with you. I will wait outside the east wall at sundown." She walked out alone. Sand manipulators tracked Naruto from the walls. Suna's defensive sensor array locked onto his position the moment he appeared within range, and the standing order from the Kazekage's office was, "Observe, do not engage. Alert immediately if hostile action is detected." Tamari walked through the east gate with her battle fan strapped to her back and zero visible fear on her face. She was 20 meters from him when she spoke. Her voice carried in the desert air. "You destroyed Iwa, yes, and broke the Raikage's neck. He started it." She looked him over. Her eyes moved the way a person's eyes move when they are evaluating a weapon, assessing edge, weight, balance, purpose. She had spent her entire life in the shadow of Gaara's power, her youngest brother, the Jinchuriki of the One Tail, the boy whose sand killed people before he finished deciding whether to let them live. She had made herself formidable enough in that shadow that no one in Suna could dismiss her. She respected power. She respected power even more when it was honest about what it was. What do you want from me? Someone who fights. Someone who makes decisions under pressure and gets them right. I'm building a clan and I need people who can hold real authority in it, who can lead when I'm pointed somewhere else. I'm an ally of Konoha's treaty with Suna. This would complicate both. Every interesting thing complicates something, Naruto said. He smiled when he said it, a small, genuine expression that sat differently on his face than the expressions he showed to enemies. It was the kind of smile that belonged to someone having a conversation he was actually enjoying. She was quiet for a moment. The desert wind moved her hair. Behind her, Suna's walls caught the last of the sunset light. Ahead of her, a boy who could destroy nations was waiting for her answer, with the specific patience of someone who already knew what it would be and was content to let her arrive at it on her own schedule. I'll think about it. She did not go back through the gate. She stood beside him while she thought. At some point, at a moment so gradual she could never identify the exact second it happened, she stopped standing beside him and started walking in the same direction. The transition was seamless. The decision was made somewhere between one footstep and the next, and by the time she noticed it had happened, they were already 100 meters from the wall and moving further. Behind them, on the wall, a sensor analyst made a note in his log. Subject departed with target. Appeared voluntary. No coercion detected. He paused. He added, also no chance of retrieval recommended. He underlined the second sentence twice. Naruto returned to Konoha 36 hours after he had left, with a dent in his headband and his growing clan scattered across the nations, waiting for the signal that would bring them together permanently. He had work left to do. The story of what happened at the Valley of the End traveled fast through Konoha's information networks. Sasuke challenged him. Sasuke had been building toward this since the bell test. The humiliation of watching Naruto catch Kakashi's punch with an open palm had calcified into an obsession that Sasuke dressed in the language of rivalry but carried the weight of something closer to existential need. He needed to prove the Sharingan was supreme. He needed to prove that his bloodline, his loss, his suffering made him the strongest. He needed to beat the one person who made all of his progress feel small. He found Naruto at the Valley of the End, the place where the first Hokage and Madara Uchiha had fought to a standstill a century ago. Their statues still standing on either side of the waterfall, frozen in the moment before their final exchange. Sasuke stood on Madara's head. He called Naruto's name across the water. Naruto floated down from the clouds. He landed at the center of the valley, on the water between the two statues, standing on the surface the way other people stand on solid ground. He looked at Sasuke across the distance. You came here for a fight, an observation. His voice carried across the waterfall's spray. I came here to prove I'm stronger, to prove the Sharingan is the strongest in this world. The Sharingan reads chakra movement and copies jutsu, Naruto said. I use zero chakra in combat, so you brought a scanner to a battle where there's nothing to scan. You don't know what I'm capable of. I know your complete history, your fighting style, the trigger conditions for every ability you currently possess, and the name of the woman your brother used to love before he killed her. Naruto's voice was even. The delivery was factual and carried zero malice, which somehow made it hit harder than cruelty would have. Sasuke, you are an extra in my story. There's no version of this conversation that changes that. Sasuke's Sharingan blazed to life. 3 tomoe in each eye, spinning at full speed. He charged. His body moved at a speed that was genuinely impressive. Sharingan-enhanced prediction, muscles trained to the breaking point and beyond. The Chidori screaming to life in his right hand as he crossed the distance. Lightning chakra concentrated into a focused assassination technique, the sound of 1,000 birds filling the valley. He had trained for this moment. He had bled for this speed. It was real power by any standard the shinobi world used to measure power. Naruto turned around. He delivered a backhand with his left hand, open palm, without completing the turn. The motion was casual in the most devastating possible way, the kind of casual that communicates more about power differential than any full power attack ever could. He hit Sasuke with approximately 1% of his available strength while facing the wrong direction. Sasuke crossed the entire width of the Valley of the End. His body traveled through the waterfall, through it, the water parting around his passage, and impacted the stone face of the far cliff. The curse mark, which had been active and spreading across Sasuke's skin during the charge, collapsed. The seal's entire chakra framework burned out on impact. Orochimaru's masterwork, some of the finest seal engineering the world had ever produced, annihilated instantly by a power differential so extreme that the cursed seal's architecture simply disintegrated in the proximity of greater force. Sasuke lay in the indentation his body had made in the cliff face. He was unconscious. He was breathing. His Sharingan had deactivated. The curse mark was gone from his skin entirely. No trace of it remained. Naruto walked across the water to Sasuke's resting place. He looked down at the unconscious Uchiha for a moment. His expression shifted, very slightly, for very briefly, into something that carried a complexity the earlier interactions had lacked. He had been Sasuke once, in his first life. The boy with the dead world, the consumed family, the power that arrived too late to save anyone. He understood what drove Sasuke better than Sasuke understood it himself. When you wake up, you are going to have to decide if you're the kind of person who gets better or the kind who stays where they are. That is the only choice left to you. Everything else has already been decided. He turned and walked away. A medical team from Konoha, dispatched the moment the energy signatures had been detected at the valley, would find Sasuke within the hour. He would recover. The absence of the curse mark would confuse Kakashi's team for weeks before they accepted that it was simply gone, removed by a force that exceeded its creator's engineering by an order of magnitude. Naruto was already thinking about the next phase. The tailed beast hunt moved at the pace of a force that could cross continents in minutes and had zero opposition capable of slowing it down. He had the 9 tails. He had the 8 tails. He had the 7 tails through Fu's willing partnership. He moved through the remaining 6 with the focused energy of someone working through a checklist that had a deadline attached. The 6 tails was held in Kirigakure by a man named Utakata, who had already left his village and was wandering the land of water alone. Naruto found him in a bamboo forest, offered the same terms he offered every Jinchuriki, and waited. Utakata blew a bubble, his signature technique, an absent habit, and watched it drift away. "I've been running for years," he said. "Running from what I am. You're offering me a place to stop." Naruto nodded. Utakata agreed. The extraction was painless. The 6 tails settled into Naruto's seal network and was greeted by Kurama's increasingly dry welcome. The 5 tails had the best fight of the collection. 15 seconds that left a lake in the land of steam 2 kilometers wider than it had been at the start of the engagement. The Jinchuriki was a man named Han, encased in steam armor, who possessed the kind of determination that does not yield even when the brain has already processed that it should. He threw everything. The steam armor operated at temperatures that should have made close contact lethal for any attacker. Naruto walked through the steam field the way he had walked through the particle style, unfazed, undamaged, his hand emerging from the white cloud to grip Han's shoulder with a gentleness that contrasted completely with the force that had just shrugged off his strongest technique. "Enough," Naruto said. Han stopped. The 4 tails lasted longer than expected. Its Jinchuriki, Roshi, an old man who had spent decades in isolated training and achieved a communion with his beast that most Jinchuriki never managed, fought with the kind of skill that comes from a lifetime of practice. Lava release techniques painted the mountainside orange and red. Naruto let him work for 20 seconds, an eternity in a fight where Naruto could end things in less than 1. Because the technique was beautiful, and the practitioner had earned the respect of a moment's acknowledgement. Then he ended it with a single application of freeze breath, temperature dropping so fast across the entire lava field that the molten stone flash froze mid-flow, creating a landscape of crystallized fire that would become a tourist attraction within a year. The 3 tails lasted exactly as long as Naruto decided. The two tails came willingly through Yugito. The one tail was extracted from Gaara in Suna with Tamari's assistance. She had explained the situation to her brother in her own words, and Gaara, who understood what it meant to carry a beast he had never chosen, who understood better than almost anyone what it felt like to be defined by a power that was never his, consented. The extraction was clean. Gaara survived it. He was weaker without the one tail, but for the first time in his life, his sleep was dreamless and complete. 9-tailed beasts, all secured, all housed in a seal network designed by an Uzumaki intelligence operating at a level generations beyond anything the clan had previously produced. Inside that network, 9 ancient beings coexisted in a space that respected their individuality while harnessing their collective power. Kurama, who had been the first, had settled into a role that resembled something between senior advisor and reluctant den mother. He would deny both descriptions violently if asked. Naruto went to a mountain high enough that cloud cover sat thousands of meters below, far enough from any settlement that no chakra sensor in the 5 nations could detect him at range. The peak was barren, wind-scoured stone, thin air, the kind of place where nothing grew because nothing was meant to live at this altitude. The sky above was the deep blue that comes before black at the edge of the atmosphere. He needed what came next to happen alone. He formed the seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 3 copies of himself appeared, complete duplicates at full power, each carrying a fragment of the inner sun's reserve energy in their own chest seals. They were solid, real, and carrying enough stored solar power to level a small country each. He looked at them. They looked back with his own eyes. You know where to go. They launched upward. The 3 clones broke the sound barrier within 2 seconds of departure. The reader follows them, the world falling away beneath, the curve of the horizon becoming visible as they pass through the troposphere, the silence that arrives as the atmosphere thins and then disappears entirely. The blue gives way to black. Stars appear by the million in every direction, undimmed by atmosphere, pure and unfiltered. Ahead of them, the sun. They flew into it. Through the photosphere, the visible surface, where temperatures ran at 6,000 degrees and the radiation was a constant wash of every wavelength. Into the chromosphere, the transitional layer, denser, hotter, the solar energy pressing against their Kryptonian cells at saturation levels that pushed their absorption rates toward theoretical maximum. Down further, into the convection zone. The temperature here exceeded 1,000,000 degrees. The radiation density was such that even Kryptonian biology was registering input levels it had never previously processed. They held position. They absorbed. Every cell in their bodies drank solar energy at maximum throughput for 60 full seconds. 60 seconds that, at these saturation levels, were equivalent to standing under Earth's yellow sun for a decade of continuous exposure. They turned back. They broke free of the sun's gravity, well using raw speed. They re-entered the atmosphere, trailing plasma that burned off their forms in golden streamers visible from the ground as 3 shooting stars arriving from an impossible direction. They returned in 3 separate flashes of light. Naruto dispersed them before they touched the mountain peak. The memory transfer from 3 clones returning simultaneously was a physical event. The solar charge they carried, the accumulated energy from 60 seconds inside the sun's convection zone multiplied by 3, slammed into his system through the clone memory integration pathway and overwhelmed every processing buffer he had. He dropped to one knee. The inner sun exploded past every previous output level. The seal on his sternum blazed with a light that was visible through his clothing, through his skin, through the stone beneath his knee. His Kryptonian cells absorbed the charge and expanded their capacity in real time. The biological equivalent of a reservoir suddenly receiving an ocean. He could feel the power in his bloodstream, in his teeth, in the way the rock beneath his knee developed a spiderweb of cracks from the weight of his aura pressing down through simple proximity. He opened himself to the natural energy flowing through the mountain. It came in waves. Through the stone beneath him, ancient, patient, carrying the mineral weight of geological ages. Through the wind from the peaks to the east, fast, clean, carrying the sharp energy of altitude and distance. Through the valley below, alive, green, pulsing with the collective life force of every growing thing in its basin. Nature energy flooded into his system alongside the solar charge. Two fundamentally different power systems running in the same body. They should have conflicted. Kryptonian biology operated on solar absorption. Sage mode operated on natural energy integration. The two systems should have fought each other, producing feedback, instability, damage. They did not fight. They braided. The Uzumaki chakra system, the bridge he had been born with, the genetic inheritance of a clan that specialized in connecting and containing energies that others could only channel in isolation, acted as the integration framework between Kryptonian biology and sage physiology. It converted and merged both energy types into something that was more than either one alone. A synthesis, a transcendence, something that had never existed before because no one with all three systems had ever existed before. Naruto stood up. His aura changed. The white that had surrounded him since the solar storage seal's activation, the warm, star surface white of contained solar energy, shifted upward. It went past white into something above white. A color that sat at the edge of the visible spectrum and pressed beyond it, pure, total. Visible from the valley below as a pillar of light that cut upward through the cloud cover and held for 7 seconds before he pulled it in. Universal Sage Mode. Active. Online, running at full output, he was the most powerful being who had ever drawn breath in this world. He had been the most powerful being in this world since he was 6 years old, standing in a plaza full of dead adults. The gap between then and now was the gap between a river and an ocean. Both water, both powerful, one of them beyond any container the world could build. He floated above the peak. The air around him shimmered. A confused hawk circled at a distance. Drawn by the heat, perhaps by the light, its small brain unable to categorize what it was seeing and defaulting to curiosity. He watched it trace its lazy circle. He appreciated the simplicity of its existence. A creature that lived in the moment, that hunted and flew, and knew nothing of pocket dimensions or multiversal walls, or the weight of memories from a dead world. "All right," he said, to the hawk, to the sky, to himself. One more thing. He carried 9-tailed beasts. He carried the inner sun at maximum charge. He carried universal sage mode. He carried 2 lifetimes of knowledge. One spent reading comics about heroes, one spent becoming something beyond them. He carried the memory of Earth Prime and Lori and what it felt like to watch everything dissolve in antimatter light. One thing remained. He returned to the mountain peak. He sat in the air above it, cross-legged, eyes closed. He allowed the combined chakra of all 9-tailed beasts, fully accessible through their seal network, freely given by 9 ancient beings who had chosen to follow rather than resist, to flow through his Uzumaki system simultaneously. The chakra of the 1 tail through 9 tails merged with the inner sun's output, merged with universal sage mode's nature energy integration, merged with the Kryptonian cellular structure that made his body the most efficient energy processing system ever to exist in biological form. The combination reached critical mass. His eyes changed. The irises shifted. The blue that had characterized his eyes in this life bled away, replaced by something that climbed upward through the spectrum, past amber, past violet, past lavender, arriving at a purple so deep it looked like a sky at the edge of a storm. Concentric rings formed 6 paths, radiating outward from the center of each pupil in perfect geometric precision. The rings pulsed once with a light that came from inside the eye rather than reflecting from outside. The Rinnegan opened. Naruto opened his eyes, and he could see everything. Every chakra system in the shinobi world appeared in his perception as a point of light. Millions of them, scattered across the continents, each one a living being. Every tailed beast signature, every nature energy current, every ley line of power running through the Earth's crust became visible to him as components of a single enormous system. He could see the dimensional walls. They appeared in his Rinnegan vision as surfaces, semi-transparent barriers separating one reality from the next, layered like pages in a book, each one pressing against its neighbors with the weight of an entire universe behind it. He could see where the walls were thick and where they were thin. He could see the places where one universe pushed against another and the distance between them narrowed to something measurable. He could see the DC universe. It was there. On the other side of a wall that was very thick, but was very clearly, very measurably, very definitively less than infinite. The wall had a thickness. It had a composition. It had stress points and seams and places where the barrier's integrity was lower than its average. It could be broken by something that hit it hard enough. He looked at his hands. He looked at the sky above him. "I'm the star here," he said. The words were for himself, spoken to the empty air above a mountain peak at the edge of the world, the kind of thing a person says when they are about to do something that cannot be undone, and they need to hear their own conviction one final time before they commit. "I'm the lead." He smiled. It was the first real smile in years. Wide and honest, and reaching his eyes in a way that made his face look like the boy he might have been if 2 lifetimes of loss had not been stacked on his shoulders. It was a beautiful smile because it was genuine, and it was terrifying because what it was celebrating was the imminent destruction of a dimensional barrier that had separated 2 realities since the beginning of time. And in this story, I'm the hero. He stood up in the air, his aura blazed to full output. Universal Sage Mode, the Inner Sun, 9-tailed beasts, and the Rinnegan running simultaneously. He was a small sun above the mountain, visible from space, detectable by every sensor in the 5 nations, impossible to ignore or misidentify. "It's prime time." A beat. The smile widened. I've been saving that one. He rose, through the troposphere, through the stratosphere, through the mesosphere, up, past the edge of the atmosphere, into the space between the world and the stars. The shinobi world turned beneath him. A blue and green sphere, small from this height, carrying billions of lives in its surface layer, like organisms on the skin of a fruit. Beautiful, in a way he could appreciate even while planning to leave it. He could feel his growing clan below. Samui in transit, Mabui preparing, Fu flying patrol over the land of fire, Yugito meditating in a forest clearing, Tamari standing on a sand dune looking at the sky as if she could feel him looking back. Hinata and Hanabi training together in a compound he had provided for them, training harder than either of them had ever trained in their lives, training with a purpose that belonged to them rather than to their clan's expectations. He could feel all of them. The Rinnegan made the world transparent. He floated at the edge of space. He could feel the planet below. He could feel the tailed beasts in their seals, vibrating with something that in Kurama's case was unmistakably anticipation. The fox had waited for this moment with a patience he had never previously demonstrated for anything except revenge. He could feel the dimensional wall in front of him, invisible to every other sense, but to the Rinnegan it was a surface. And that surface was about to learn what happened when something with the power of 9-tailed beasts, a star-charged Kryptonian body, Universal Sage Mode, and the Rinnegan 6 Paths Authority decided it was time for the wall to stop being a wall. He formed a single seal with his right hand, an original configuration combining Uzumaki locking array principles with a kinetic focusing pattern he had designed at age 7 in the ruins by lamplight. The seal was simple in its architecture and impossible in its requirements. It required a power input that only one being in the history of all realities could provide, and it worked by channeling that input into a single point of contact with enough focused force to break a dimensional barrier. He called it the Dimensional Fist. He had carried it since he was 7 years old. He had never used it because it only worked once, and it only worked when the power behind it was total. The power behind it was total. He pulled Universal Sage Mode to maximum output. The white aura expanded around him in a sphere that was visible from the planet's surface as a new star appearing in the daytime sky. He pulled the inner sun to every joule the seal had accumulated since its activation. Years of continuous absorption, supplemented by 3 clone trips into the heart of the actual sun. He pulled the Rinnegan's 6 Paths power, the authority to interact with fundamental forces, with gravity, with the pathways between dimensions, with the walls separating realities from each other, and channeled all 3 into the single point of his right fist. His fist began to glow. It went past glow. The light concentrated around his knuckles at a density that made looking at it painful even from inside his own aura. The power compressed. The compression generated heat, generated gravity, generated a localized distortion field that bent the space around his hand in a visible warping effect. The stars behind his fist displaced, shifted, as the fabric of space itself flexed around the power being concentrated there. Below, on the planet's surface, every sensor-type ninja in the 5 nations fired every alarm they had at the same moment. Every sleeping civilian in Konoha woke at 3 in the morning because their bodies told them to wake up before their minds had a reason. The third Hokage walked to his window. He looked at the sky. He saw the new star burning above the world. His pipe was in his hand, cold, forgotten. He understood, in the way that old men understand things they cannot prevent, that whatever was happening above his village was beyond any response his authority could mount. Naruto pulled his fist back. He thought of Lori, her face in the sunlight, her laugh, the way she said his name, his real name Clark, like it was the most normal thing in the world, because in her world it was. He thought of Earth Prime, a world where Superman was a comic book character and Clark Kent was a regular kid from a regular family who happened to have powers that made him the real thing. He thought of the Paradise Dimension, years spent watching, years spent powerless, years of being told he was safe while feeling his sanity erode one day at a time. He thought of the Flashes. He thought of the Speed Force. He thought of every comic that wrote him as the villain and every reader who believed it. He thought of this life, 6 years old in the dirt, kunai and fire and the word demon said like a prayer, standing up, the red in his eyes. The decision that formed in that moment, the decision that had led to everything after, to the Uzumaki archive, to the Solar Seal, to the Academy, to the team, to the nations, to the beasts, to this moment at the edge of space with a god's power in his fist and a universe on the other side of a wall that was about to stop existing. He punched forward. Dimensional fist! The technique connected with the wall between realities. The dimensional barrier did not open. It did not yield. It broke apart. The break started at the point of impact, his knuckles against something that had no physical substance, but resisted force in the way that physical substances resist force, and traveled outward in all directions simultaneously. Cracks spreading across the sky above Konoha in a spiderweb pattern, visible from the ground as fracture lines appearing in the air itself, as if the dome of the sky were made of glass and something had struck it from above with the weight of everything. Through the cracks, light. A light that did not belong to this sky. A bronze and electric quality. The particular glow of a universe where the Justice League operated, where Superman flew above Metropolis, where power came in 100 flavors, and the greatest heroes in history wore their symbols on their chests for the world to see. The sound arrived a half second behind the visual. A crack that traveled at the speed of sound across the entire shinobi world, hitting every window in Konoha simultaneously, sending animals running in a 50-kilometer radius, waking every sleeping person within range, and pulling them to their windows to look at a sky that had developed fractures like a broken mirror. The cracks spread. The wall fought. It was a dimensional barrier. It was designed to hold. It had held for the entire history of both realities it separated. And it pushed back against the intrusion with the weight of that history behind it. The Rinnegan pushed harder. The inner sun fed the effort. Nine-tailed beasts added their power to the sustained assault on the barrier's integrity. Universal Sage Mode provided the framework that kept all 3 energy types working in harmony rather than tearing Naruto apart from the inside. The cracks won. With a sound that was beyond sound, a resonance that existed in every frequency simultaneously, that was felt in the teeth and the chest and the bones rather than heard through the ears. The barrier between realities gave way. The hole opened. It was enormous, 20 meters across, hanging in the sky above the shinobi world like a wound in the air itself, edges glowing with the residual energy of the barrier's collapse. Through it, the other side. Another sky, another sun, yellow, real, pouring radiation through the breach that hit Naruto's cells and made the inner sun's accumulated charge look like a candle next to a bonfire. The actual, original, unfiltered yellow sun of the DC universe. The Rinnegan held the breach open. The dimensional fist seal anchored its edges. The continuous output of the inner sun kept it stable and prevented collapse. It would remain open as long as Naruto willed it. and Naruto had zero intention of closing it. He floated in front of the breach, his aura blazing at maximum output, the white beyond white of Universal Sage Mode catching the DC Universe's yellow sunlight and amplifying, the Rinnegan's purple rings catching the light from both worlds simultaneously. The heat vision's pre-activation glow warmed the air around his face in a halo of red gold. He looked at the hole. He looked at the world on the other side. He stepped through. He came out above Metropolis on a weekday afternoon. The sky above him was blue and clear and had never contained what it now contained. The city below stretched to the horizon in every direction. 12 million people living in a metropolis built around the idea of a hero. Superman's symbol on buildings, his history in museums, his face on murals. The Daily Planet building rising from the center of the skyline with its golden globe rotating at the peak, catching sunlight that meant something different to Naruto's cells than it did to anyone else in this atmosphere. Naruto floated at 50 meters above the building line. He breathed. The yellow sunlight here was the real thing, the original source, the unfiltered, undiminished radiation of a young yellow star in a universe where Kryptonian biology had been the apex of evolutionary achievement for millions of years. His cells responded immediately, saturation climbing at a rate that made every previous peak output he had achieved in the shinobi world look like operating at 10% capacity. The inner sun expanded its storage, his strength climbed, his speed threshold rose. His durability increased. He had never been this powerful. He was getting more powerful by the second. Every second he spent under this sun, the gap between himself and everything else in this universe grew wider. Below, the city noticed him. A floating figure in orange and black, surrounded by an aura of white light that cast a second set of shadows from the buildings below. Phones came out on the streets. A news helicopter banked in from the east, camera already live. The Daily Planet's rooftop camera, running 24 hours a day, because Metropolis had learned a long time ago that the important things happened in the sky, locked onto him, and began transmitting live to every screen in the building and every affiliate station on the eastern seaboard. 3 figures appeared in the air across from him. The first wore a red cape, blue suit, the S symbol on his chest, the symbol that, in another life, in another world, in a universe that had been erased by antimatter before this one even began, had meant something pure and true and good. Superman, Kal-El of Krypton, the man who had looked at Superboy-Prime with fear instead of kinship, the man who had allowed him to be imprisoned, the man who had been everything Clark Kent of Earth Prime had wanted to grow up to be, and who had treated him as a threat the moment he stopped being convenient. The second wore blue and gold. Tiara, sword at her hip. Wonder Woman, Diana of Themyscira, the warrior goddess who had stood with Superman when they put Prime down. The third was Shadow, scalloped cape, pointed ears, a jet-wing vehicle holding position, instruments already scanning, calculations already running. Batman, Bruce Wayne, the man who planned for everything and had never planned for this. Superman advanced. He looked at the boy floating across from him. Blonde hair moving in the upper atmosphere wind, orange and black clothing that belonged to a different world's aesthetic. Red marks on his cheekbones, white aura doing something to the surrounding atmosphere that his Kryptonian cells registered as familiar. Deeply, unsettlingly familiar. The power signature was Kryptonian. It was Kryptonian the way his own was Kryptonian, and that made zero sense and every kind of sense at the same time. He looked at the fading dimensional breach in the sky behind the boy. The wound in reality that was still glowing, still open, still showing another world's sky through its edges. He looked at the Rinnegan eyes, those concentric purple rings carrying authority his own vision couldn't fully parse. He opened his mouth. Who? Naruto cut him off. He smiled. It was open, genuine, reaching his eyes with a warmth that carried nothing behind it, resembling restraint or mercy. The white aura blazed around him, brighter now, fed by the real yellow sun of this universe, growing stronger every second. The Rinnegan locked onto Superman's face and read everything. The power level, the weaknesses, the speed, the limits, all of it cataloged in the space between one heartbeat and the next. You fake heroes ruined my life. His voice carried across the Metropolis skyline. It traveled at the volume of someone who wanted to be heard and had the power to make certain of it. Every news microphone within range picked it up. It went live on 6 networks. 12 million people heard it simultaneously through their screens, their phones, their car radios. "Now," Naruto said, "I'm taking your planet." He tilted his head. The smile held. His posture in the air was relaxed. Arms at his sides, shoulders loose, floating with the absolute ease of someone who could destroy everything beneath him and was choosing, moment by moment, to wait. The Renegade's purple light pulsed once. "And I'm taking your women." Superman's jaw locked. The muscle at the corner of his mouth tightened. His eyes, which carried the same heat vision potential that Naruto's did, which had stared down Darkseid and Doomsday and the Anti-Monitor himself, were looking at this boy and finding something in his aura, in his power signature, in the quality of his presence that Superman's instincts identified as equal. His instincts had never identified anything as equal. Wonder Woman's hand moved to the hilt of her sword. The motion was smooth and trained and carried the weight of 3,000 years of warrior conditioning. Her eyes were assessing. She was reading the boy's stance, his aura, the way he held himself in the air, and her assessment was producing conclusions she found deeply uncomfortable. Batman was running calculations. He had been running them since the moment the dimensional breach opened, since the energy readings spiked on every monitoring system the Justice League possessed, since his own personal array had flagged the incoming signature as Kryptonian plus unknown, and he had dropped everything to respond. The calculations were still running. The numbers they were producing were giving him 0 good answers. Every simulation he ran ended the same way: insufficient data for a viable counter-strategy. He had never faced that result before. He had contingencies for Superman. He had contingencies for Darkseid. His contingency file for this unknown was empty and filling with blank pages. The 12 million people of Metropolis, watching this live on every screen, every phone, every display in the city, went completely silent for the first time in the city's recorded history. The traffic noise stopped. The construction noise stopped. The human sound of 12 million voices and 12 million lives all paused at the same moment, because every person in this city was looking at the same sky and seeing the same thing: a boy in orange and black, surrounded by the light of something beyond comprehension, facing down the 3 most powerful heroes on Earth and smiling like he had already won. Above them, Uzumaki Naruto hovered in a borrowed sky at full power for the first time in either of his lives, and waited to see who moved first. The silence held for 2 full seconds, the specific 2 seconds during which 12 million people in a city that had survived Doomsday, Darkseid, and the Anti-Monitor stopped everything they were doing and looked at the same sky and found the same boy in it. News helicopters circled at safe distance, cameras locked, feeds running live to every screen in the Western Hemisphere. The Daily Planet's rooftop unit transmitted to 6 affiliate stations. A news anchor on GBS opened her mouth to provide commentary and found that her professional vocabulary had left her. She sat on live television with her lips parted and her eyes on the monitor and said absolutely nothing for the first time in her 11-year career. Superman moved first. He had to. He was the kind of person who moved first because inaction in the face of a threat to his world was the single thing his character could never accommodate. He flew forward, controlled speed, hands raised slightly, the posture of someone establishing that this exchange was a conversation before it became something else. He closed half the distance between them and stopped, hovering in the air across from a blonde boy in orange and black, whose white aura was doing something to the atmosphere that Clark's cells recognized on a molecular level as the same thing they did. "I don't know who you are," Superman said. His voice carried across the gap between them with the particular resonance of a man who had spent his entire life choosing his words because his words carried weight. "I don't know where you came from, but I know what it looks like when someone is in pain. I know what it looks like when someone has been through something that broke them in ways they can't fix alone." He held eye contact with the Renegade eyes, those concentric purple rings that pulsed with a light source his X-ray vision could trace to 0 origin. "Whatever happened to you, whatever brought you here, There are better ways to carry it than this. There are people in this world who will listen, who understand loss, who have been broken and found something on the other side of that breaking that was worth. I've read that speech. Naruto's voice cut through Superman's in the way that a closing door cuts through conversation. Total, immediate, and carrying zero apology for the interruption. He was smiling while he said it. The smile reached his eyes in a way that made it genuine, and that made it worse. I've read every version of it. I know exactly how it ends. You reach me. I have a moment of doubt. I make a better choice. The audience feels good about the power of compassion. That's the ending in every story you people tell. He tilted his head. The movement was small, and the air between them heated by 2 degrees from the shift in his aura's output. Except that ending only works when the heroes giving the speech are real. Superman's jaw tightened. A muscle at the corner of his mouth moved. You aren't real, Naruto said. I read the comics. I know what you are. You are a story that a better world told about itself to feel safer about everything it was actually doing. You are a symbol on a lunchbox. You are a Saturday morning cartoon that children watch while their governments decide which populations are acceptable losses. He let the words land. He watched Clark's face move through the processing of them. He gave it time. Enough time that anyone watching from below could see the two of them facing each other in the air and read the gap between the boy who was speaking and the man who was listening. That was genuine, Naruto added. Your speech. I could hear that you meant it. But meaning something and being right about it are different things. A movement from the left, fast, trained, and carrying 3,000 years of combat experience in the single arc of a wrist, Wonder Woman closed the distance in half a second. The lasso of truth unwound from her hip in a golden spiral. The throw targeting Naruto's right wrist with the aim of someone who had studied his posture since arrival and identified the opening. The throw was perfect. The kind of perfect that exists only when a warrior has dedicated multiple centuries to a single discipline. The lasso reached his wrist and wrapped. The golden cord tightened against his skin. The lasso of truth, the weapon that compelled honesty from anything it held, that had bound gods and monsters and reality-breaking threats and drawn the real answer from every single one of them, made contact with Naruto Uzumaki. He looked down at it. I know, he said. The lasso went slack. It released his wrist and fell back toward Diana's hand with the particular limpness of a tool that has attempted its function and been overwhelmed by the result. The lasso of truth compels its target to speak truth. It connects to the real in a person and pulls it forward. In Naruto's case, what it found was everything. Every memory of Earth Prime, Lori in the sunlight, his parents' faces, the antimatter wall eating the horizon, the paradise dimensions walls pressing in, the flashes, the armor, every moment of genuine grief and genuine rage and genuine love for a world that existed only in his cells now. The lasso found the truth, and the truth was so vast and so honest that the lasso could hold none of it. It came loose the way a fishing line comes loose when what it hooks is the ocean floor. Diana's arm drew back. She was holding the lasso and looking at Naruto, and something in her expression shifted. Something behind her eyes moved from one position to another, like a dial finding a new setting. She had held this weapon for 3,000 years. She knew what truth felt like when it passed through the golden cord. She had never felt that volume of truth in a single contact. Naruto noted her expression. He said nothing about it. He turned back to Superman. The League gets one round of trying, he said, because I am feeling generous and because I want it on record that you had a chance. After that, I start making permanent decisions. Batman's voice came from the jet wing hovering at observation distance, carried through a directional speaker aimed at the engagement zone. Even, measured, stripped of everything except the question itself. What do you want? I told you, Naruto said. His eyes found the jet wing without turning his head. X-ray vision tracing the interior, the man inside it, the instruments running, the kryptonite emitter housing warming up in the wing's left chassis compartment. I want your planet. For what purpose? Batman said. Naruto smiled wider. The white aura around him flared a half degree brighter, And on the ground below, people standing in sunlight felt a second source of warmth on their skin from above. I want to remake it. One protector, one set of rules. No more councils voting on which populations matter. No more heroes picking and choosing who deserves saving based on whether the cameras are running. The smile stayed. My way. Or I can show you what I did to the last village that attacked me first. Superman launched. He came in at full speed. Kryptonian maximum, the kind of velocity that generated a pressure trail visible from satellite, and opened with a combination designed over a lifetime of fighting things that could survive being hit by planets. Heat vision at full output fired from 3 meters away to establish the angle, followed immediately by a physical charge that used the heat vision's distraction window to close the remaining distance. The heat vision cut through the upper atmosphere at temperatures that would have converted concrete to vapor. The physical charge carried the momentum of a body that had once pushed a moon out of orbit. Naruto swung the heat vision aside with his bare forearm. The beam hit his skin and deflected, twin lines of red energy scattering off his arm at 45-degree angles, cutting harmlessly into the upper atmosphere where they dissipated against the stratosphere. His forearm carried 0 mark from the contact. The visual of it, Superman's full-power heat vision bouncing off a boy's forearm the way light bounces off a mirror, went out live on every newsfeed covering the engagement. His other hand came forward. The solar storage seal blazed through his shirt in gold line geometry as the inner sun channeled its accumulated reserve into the kinetic framework of a single point. Infinite mass punch. The impact connected with Superman's chest. The sound arrived a full second behind the visual, a crack that split the air above Metropolis in a horizontal shockwave, visible as a white ring expanding outward from the contact point. Superman left the engagement zone traveling backward through 6 city blocks of open air before his flight stabilized and reversed his momentum. Glass in the buildings below the flight path cracked from the pressure wake. He came back faster than the shockwave had traveled. He came back with everything. The Arctic breath deployed as a wide cone freeze attack at maximum output, cold enough to ice the bay below solid in under 2 seconds. The freeze hit Naruto from the front. Ice formed around him, a shell of crystallized atmosphere, dense, immediate, covering him in a cocoon of frozen air that should have locked a Kryptonian's muscles long enough for a follow-up strike. Naruto breathed. One exhale. The inner sun compensated for the temperature differential in a fraction of a second, his cells reading the cold, rejecting it, generating heat from their internal solar matrix at a rate that turned the ice shell to steam before it finished forming. He stood in a cloud of vapor that dispersed in the wind, untouched, his aura cycling at resting output. "Nice try," he said. He was looking past Superman while he said it, looking at Batman's jet wing, his X-ray vision tracking the kryptonite emitter completing its warm-up cycle inside the chassis. He raised one finger. He pointed it at the jet wing. Heat vision. A single thread-focused beam, hair-thin, intense enough to melt tungsten, fired from his fingertip and crossed 300 meters of open air in the time between one heartbeat and the next. It entered the jet wing's chassis through the port maintenance panel, found the kryptonite emitter housing, and melted it into a puddle of slag and green crystal that dripped onto the wing's interior floor. The wing itself stayed airborne. Batman compensated for the thermal spike in under a second. The kryptonite was gone. Inside the jet wing, Batman watched his contingency monitor go blank in the way that monitors go blank when the hardware they are connected to has been reduced to liquid metal. He reached for the secondary system, the red sun emitter, mounted behind the pilot's seat, designed to flood a targeted area with red solar radiation that would drain a Kryptonian's cells and reduce them to baseline human function. He activated it. The red sun emitter deployed through the wing's lower array, a wide dispersal beam of red solar radiation hitting Naruto's position from above. The beam found his body. It passed over his skin. His cells registered the wavelength the way cells register any incoming energy signature, processed it, evaluated it, determined its relevance. The inner sun kept running. The red sun emitter was designed to suppress external solar charging. It replaced the yellow radiation, feeding Kryptonian cells with a red wavelength that their structure could extract nothing from. It worked on Superman because Superman's power came from outside. The inner sun was inside. The solar storage seal fed Naruto's Kryptonian cells from a sealed reservoir that had zero connection to external solar input. The red sunbeam hit a system it was never designed to interact with and accomplished exactly as much as shining a flashlight at a nuclear reactor. Naruto looked up at the red beam hitting his body. He looked at it the way a person looks at rain they expect it to be heavier. He waved one hand and the beam scattered against his palm. Inside the Jetwing, Batman watched the red sun emitter's output hit its target and produce zero measurable effect on the target's power signature. He reached for the next contingency file. He opened it. The file was empty. He sat in his Jetwing above Metropolis and held that empty file in his mind for 4 full seconds. In those 4 seconds, Bruce Wayne understood something with a totality that he had experienced fewer than 5 times in his adult life. He was in a situation where every tool he had built, every plan he had prepared, every contingency he had designed across decades of facing threats that would have ended civilizations, all of it was sitting on the floor in pieces. His instruments read the power signature in front of them and produced numbers that climbed past every value his systems were built to display. 4 seconds. Then he banked the Jetwing north and flew. He had exhausted his options in the field. Bruce Wayne's response to exhausting his options in the field was to go somewhere else and build new ones. Wonder Woman hit the engagement from above. She descended from her holding altitude with the God-Killer's sword in her right hand, retrieved from secure storage before this engagement because Diana of Themyscira had been doing this long enough to recognize when a threat required weapons she did not carry on standard rotation. The sword moved in her grip the way swords move when someone has dedicated their entire existence to understanding what a blade can do. 3 cuts in descending sequence, each one targeting a different vital angle, each one carrying the momentum of 3,000 years of warrior discipline. Refined into a single edge, Naruto caught the 3rd cut on his open palm. The blade pressed into his skin. The metal, Hephaestus forged, designed to cut anything the Greek pantheon considered cuttable, met his Kryptonian cellular density and bent. The edge curved inward against his palm the way a butter knife curves when pressed against stone. He held the blade for 1 second and then released it, a choice made visible to let it bend rather than snap. He handed it back. "You are extraordinary," he told her. The compliment carried 0 performance. It was the genuine assessment of someone who had spent 2 lifetimes fighting and had watched very few people move the way she moved. "You are the finest fighter I have watched in this world." He tilted his head. The same small movement, the same heating of the air. "You are still fighting something that cannot be beaten with a blade." She held his gaze. She was reading him. 3,000 years of reading opponents and allies and the gap between what a person shows and what a person carries. She saw the gap. She saw what was underneath the performance. Superman came in for the second pass. He hit Naruto. Full power, 0 restraint. The commitment of a man who had processed the situation and decided that this engagement required everything he had and possibly more. His fists connected with Naruto's body in a sequence that would have leveled city blocks if the shockwaves had been aimed downward. 6 impacts. 10. 15. Each one thrown with the full weight of a Kryptonian who was fighting the way he fought Darkseid. Without limits, without the restraint he used against everything else, because everything he was seeing told him that restraint here was a luxury the situation could no longer afford. Naruto stood still. His feet stayed in the same position in the air. His aura absorbed the impacts and redistributed the energy through the inner sun's framework. Each hit that landed registered as input, solar charge kinetic force meeting a solar charged body and finding that the body's charge exceeded the force behind the fist. Superman's knuckles split on the 4th impact. Kryptonian against Kryptonian, the denser structure always won. Blood appeared on his hands, his own blood, driven out through his own skin by the recoil traveling back through his skeletal system. He stopped. He was breathing hard. His suit was torn at the shoulder from the exertion. His knuckles were bleeding. He stared at a boy who had taken 15 hits from the strongest being on this planet, and whose response to those 15 hits was an expression that communicated waiting, the kind of waiting that belongs to a person who agreed to let this happen and has decided the agreed-upon period is ending. "Are you done?" Naruto asked. Superman's fist came back. Naruto caught it in one hand, held it, stepped forward into Clark's space. They were face to face. The Rinnegan eyes met the Kryptonian blue ones at a distance measured in inches. The white aura pressed against Superman's chest. "I told you," Naruto said. "You are a story, but I'm going to give you the chance to become real." He released the fist and stepped back. He sat in the air, crossed his arms, settled his weight, let his aura cycle down to resting output. "Go get the rest of your team. I'll wait." Below, on the streets of Metropolis, a woman who had been holding her phone pointed at the sky for 3 minutes, lowered it, and looked at the man standing beside her. He was wearing the same expression she was wearing. They said nothing to each other. They looked back up. They both understood, in the part of the brain that processes scale without needing language, that the thing in the sky above their city was something their city had never contained before. At the Daily Planet, Lois Lane stood at the rooftop camera's monitor station. Her instruments were reading the energy signature. The number on her screen had been climbing since Naruto arrived and had passed the maximum value her equipment was designed to display 4 minutes ago. She was looking at a readout that said error, exceeds measurement parameters, and her hands were very still on the keyboard. She typed 2 words into her draft file, "He's real." Then she deleted them and typed, "He believes he's real." Then she deleted those and sat with her hands in her lap and watched the sky. The signal went out from the Hall of Justice at Priority 1, the designation reserved for extinction-level events and existential threats. Every monitor in the building lit simultaneously. The roster alert reached every active member in their respective positions around the globe. The Flash read the first 3 characters of the alert before he was already moving, running from Central City to Metropolis at a speed that turned the distance between them into a question answered before it finished being asked. Green Lantern dropped from orbit, ring at full charge, descending at maximum ring speed toward the coordinates. Aquaman rose from the continental shelf with the trident in his hand and the weight of the ocean's authority behind his trajectory. Cyborg received the alert through his systems and processed the accompanying scan data in 4 seconds, then processed it again in 3 because the first pass produced results he assumed were errors. The second pass produced the same results. They assembled above Metropolis in under 90 seconds. The full active roster. Every hero who wore the emblem and answered the call, arranged in formation above the skyline of a city that watched them gather with the particular feeling that accompanies a fire department arriving at a blaze with every truck in service. Naruto watched them arrive. He was still sitting in the air, arms crossed, the Rinnegan tracking each approaching power signature with the kind of interest a person has when watching pieces arrive on a board. "More extras," he said. The Flash hit first. Barry Allen, the fastest man alive, the avatar of the Speed Force, the human being who had run faster than light and faster than time and faster than the concept of distance itself, launched his engagement at full speed. He accelerated through every threshold in his arsenal in the space between one thought and the next, his body converting entirely to Speed Force energy as he crossed the gap between his position and Naruto's at a velocity that made every other combatant in the air appear frozen. Speed Force tag. The technique was a full momentum impact. The Speed Force's kinetic output channeled into a single contact point, designed to hit a target at faster than light velocity and deliver the accumulated force of infinite mass at the speed of creation. Barry had used it against beings that existed outside normal time. His fist connected with Naruto's forearm. The Speed Force drove him forward. The forearm refused to move. The momentum hit a surface so absolute that the infinite kinetic energy had nowhere to go except back through the body, carrying it. Barry's entire skeletal structure reported a single simultaneous message to his brain. Stop doing this immediately. He bounced. The recoil threw him backward at a fraction of his approach speed. He caught himself, gathered, reassessed. He came back, faster, the same result. He tried the lateral approach, running circles in the air around Naruto at a velocity that should have generated a vortex strong enough to rip the oxygen from the immediate atmosphere. The vortex formed. Naruto breathed inside it the way he breathed outside it, his lungs pulling oxygen from a sealed internal reserve that his Kryptonian body maintained independent of atmospheric pressure. The vortex spun around him and accomplished the same amount as wind accomplishes against a cliff face. Naruto extended one hand. He moved at his own maximum. The Kryptonian speed burst, a fraction of light speed, and caught Barry by the chest plate. One hand, open grip, holding the fastest man alive the way a person holds a caught ball. Barry hung in Naruto's grip. His feet were off the ground. His hands were at his sides. His eyes were very wide behind the cowl. "The last people who tried to run me into the Speed Force," Naruto said, "were the Flashes." His voice dropped below the register that carried threat and arrived at the place where statements of record live, flat, honest, and heavier for being both. "I remember all their names." He set Barry down on the street below. His hand released the chest plate with zero remaining force, depositing the fastest man alive on the pavement the way a person sets a glass on a counter. Barry stood on the metropolis sidewalk. He looked at his chest plate, where 5 fingerprints of thermal residue were fading from the material. He looked up at the sky where Naruto was already turned away, already facing the next approach. He stood there for 3 full seconds. A civilian 10 feet from him said, "Are you okay?" Barry Allen, who had run to the edge of time itself, said, "I need a minute." Green Lantern came next. Hal Jordan, test pilot, ring bearer, the man whose will had been measured by the most powerful weapon in the known universe and found sufficient, deployed at maximum construct output. The ring on his finger blazed emerald, and the light that poured from it took shape in forms that had held against Sinestro, against the Anti-Monitor's forces, against threats that existed outside standard physics. A cage first. Walls of green energy closing around Naruto from 6 sides, each wall reinforced with the particular density that Hal's willpower produced when he was fighting without limitations. Then chains, thick green bands locking around the cage's interior, compressing inward. Naruto looked at the cage. He looked at the chains. He walked through them. The inner sun's output met the Green Lantern construct's energy matrix and overloaded it on contact. Solar force pressing against will-generated energy and finding that a star is an older engine than anything fueled by emotion. Each wall that the ring generated, his aura dissolved through proximity alone. The chains reached his skin and converted to green sparks the way paper converts to ash when pressed against something burning. Hal threw another construct, a sphere, total enclosure, the single strongest containment structure his ring had ever generated. He channeled everything into it. The sphere was the ceiling of his capability. Maximum will, maximum ring output, the strongest thing he could build with the strongest tool in his arsenal. It closed around Naruto and held 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. On the 4th second, the sphere's interior light changed. The green of the ring's energy bled away, replaced by white gold. The inner sun's output expanding inside the enclosure, filling the space, pressing against the construct's walls from within at a rate that exceeded the ring's ability to reinforce. The sphere came apart. The pieces drifted away as fading green wisps. Naruto was looking at Hal through the debris with what could only be described as honest respect. The construct before this one was better, more creative. The sphere was the safe choice. Hal stared at him. His ring was still active, still generating, still trying. But the expression on his face was the expression of a man whose best has been demonstrated as insufficient and who has been told so by the person it was aimed at. "Did you just critique my constructs mid-fight?" Hal said. "Yes," Naruto said. "You have real will, strong. It belongs to you completely." He turned away. "It is pointed at the wrong person right now." His ring chimed in Hal's ear, the soft tone it used for information delivery. He asked it, "What does the power signature read?" The ring said, "Exceeds measurement parameters." "Exceed how?" Hal said. "Significantly," the ring said. Hal said nothing for a moment. Then he said a word under his breath that the ring chose to ignore. The harbor erupted. Aquaman rose from the water on the eastern shore. He rose with the ocean behind him, the entire Atlantic, responding to the call of a king who carried the authority of something older than human civilization. A wall of water climbed from the harbor, building, growing, reaching a height that put it above the tallest buildings on the waterfront. 40 meters of ocean, moving as a single directed force, bearing down on Naruto's position with the weight of 3 billion years of oceanic existence behind it. Naruto turned to face the wave. Freeze breath. The temperature drop was instantaneous and total. His Kryptonian lungs expelled air at a temperature so far below zero that the number stopped having useful meaning. The breath hit the wave at its leading edge, and the freeze traveled through the water's mass at a speed that converted liquid to solid in the time between one frame and the next. 40 meters of ocean, captured mid-crest, transformed into a cliff of ice that hung above Metropolis like a monument to the force that made it. The ice stayed. It hung in the air above the buildings, suspended by its own frozen momentum, catching the afternoon sunlight and casting prismatic colors across 12 city blocks below. He held it there, a sustained low-level breath keeping the mass elevated, preventing it from falling onto the city he had claimed as his own. He looked at the frozen wave. He looked at Aquaman treading the harbor water below. "I appreciated that one," he said. "Use the trident next time." The full assault came together in the 12 seconds it took the League to recognize that individual engagement was producing nothing and shift to their coordinated protocol. Superman from above, heat vision at sustained output. Wonder Woman from the left flank, shield forward, driving to pin and immobilize. Flash running a disruption pattern below, generating vibrations designed to interfere with flight stability. Green Lantern from the right, constructing a layered binding array, walls, chains, anchors, each one buying seconds while others struck. Aquaman driving a trident thrust from the harbor water below. Cyborg firing a white noise cannon from range. The sonic output calibrated to disrupt Kryptonian cellular coherence at the molecular level, 6 simultaneous attacks from 6 angles. The most coordinated assault this team had ever deployed against a single target. They had been watching each other's individual engagements. They had adapted. They were throwing everything because throwing things one at a time had produced nothing. Heat vision hit his chest. The shield drove into his left side. Speed force vibrations shook the air beneath him. Green energy wrapped his arms and legs. The trident point found his right shoulder. The sonic cannon hit him from behind at maximum output. Naruto's aura flared. Solar overload pulse. The white of universal sage mode went past white. The inner sun opened from resting to full cycle saturation in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Every accumulated joule, every reserve the seal had built across years of continuous absorption, plus 3 trips into the heart of the actual sun, releasing outward in a spherical wave that expanded from his body in all directions at light speed. The attacks washed over him and dissipated. Superman's heat vision scattered. The shield rebounded. The Green Lantern constructs dissolved. The trident tip stopped against his shoulder and traveled 0 millimeters further. The sonic cannon's output broke against his aura, the way sound breaks against a wall. Reflected, redirected, irrelevant. He was hit from 6 sides by the combined maximum output of the finest heroes this universe had ever assembled. And the result that the cameras captured and broadcast live was this. His hair blew back slightly. In the GBS news studio, the anchor, who had been silent for 3 minutes, said one word to her co-anchor. She said, "Oh." The co-anchor said nothing. The co-anchor had put his head in his hands. Naruto looked at the assembled league. 6 heroes arranged around him, each one carrying the evidence of their efforts in their breathing, their postures, their eyes. Each one looking at him with the particular expression that arrives when effort has been total and the result has been nothing. "I want you to understand something," he said. His voice carried in the aftermath silence. "This is me choosing to stand still." He raised his right fist. The solar storage seal activated in full. The array blazing through his shirt in golden geometry, visible from the ground, visible from the satellites 3 separate governments had redirected to this location. The inner sun pulled every available joule into the kinetic framework of a single point. The Rinnegan opened to its maximum configuration, 6 concentric rings, each one pulsing with the purple light of authority over fundamental forces. This is me choosing to hit something. He drove his fist straight down, infinite mass punch. The target was the street, concrete and bedrock and infrastructure, struck at a fraction of his available power, but aimed into the foundation layer. The punch connected and the shockwave expanded outward at surface level, with a sound that was felt rather than heard, a bass note below human hearing that traveled through the city's foundations and registered in the bodies of 12 million people as a vibration in their bones. Every car within 300 meters left the ground. They rose 2 feet and came back down on their suspensions. Every window in Metropolis broke at once. Every pane of glass in every building, in every direction, cracking simultaneously and raining down in a glittering curtain that fell through the afternoon light like silver snow. The powder covered 12 city blocks in a fine layer of reflective dust. Every person inside those 12 blocks was untouched. Every building was structurally intact. He aimed straight down into the bedrock, and the force distributed through the foundation layer rather than through the structures above. The windows broke from the vibration. The building stood. The people were startled, covered in glass dust, and completely unharmed. Superman looked at the destruction around him. He looked at Naruto above it. "You could have killed people," Superman said. "I know," Naruto said. "I chose differently. Keep that in your mind when you decide what story you tell about me." A sailor on a ferry in the East River, a man named Thomas who had worked the harbor route for 22 years and seen Superman fly overhead 1,000 times and always felt safe seeing it, stood at the rail and watched the glass powder fall across the Metropolis skyline like glitter across a snow globe. He said to the passenger beside him, "That boy just punched the ground and broke every window in the city." The passenger said, "I know." Thomas said, "And nobody's hurt." The passenger said, "I know." They watched the powder fall. The dimensional breach was still open. It hung in the sky above Metropolis, 20 meters across, edges glowing with residual barrier energy, showing the otherworld sky through its opening. Every telescope on the eastern seaboard had been pointed at it for an hour. What came through it next made the afternoon news cycle the most watched broadcast in the history of broadcasting. Tamari stepped through first. She came through the breach the way she came through every doorway in her life, with the decision already made, the assessment already complete, the moment already owned. Her battle fan was slung across her back. Her hair moved in the wind that existed between dimensions. She looked at Metropolis, the skyline, the broken windows catching light, the frozen waves still hanging above the harbor, the ring of heroes still processing what they had witnessed. And she looked at Naruto with the expression of a woman who set her expectations high and found reality only marginally more extreme. "You started without us," she said. "I was warming them up," Naruto said. She looked at the League. The League looked at her. Diana watched this woman step through a wound in the sky with a weapon on her back and an assessment in her eyes that was doing something Diana recognized from experience, reading a battlefield and finding her place in it before anyone else assigned her one. Fu came through flying. Chakra wings spread, the seven tails iridescent green casting its color against the sky above Metropolis in a display that a city accustomed to aliens, gods, and temporal anomalies still stopped to look at. She pulled a lazy arc through the sky above the tallest building in range and grinned because she could and because this sky was new and large and full of glass dust catching sunlight. "This place has good sunlight," she said from 200 meters up to nobody in particular and to everyone. Samui came through at a walk. Her feet touched the air on the Metropolis side and she paused. 1 second of assessment, her eyes tracking the 12 most significant positions in her immediate field of view. She identified the buildings with roof access, the sight lines with coverage, the approach corridors. Old habits, muscle memory from a lifetime of intelligence work. She looked at the League arranged in the air and cataloged them the way she cataloged every file that crossed the Raikage's desk. By capacity, by threat profile, by priority. Mabui stepped through with her transit seal arrays already extended. 3 glowing matrices held in her left hand, scanning the local energy architecture with the particular intensity of an analyst given an entirely new dataset. The energy signatures here are fascinating, she said. Different architecture than chakra, different entirely. Some overlap in the conversion principles. The will-based energy from the green one is particularly interesting. Yugito Ni came through last of the individual arrivals. She came through transformed, the two tails partial manifestation flickering across her skin in azure flames that made the air shimmer with spiritual heat. She landed on the building nearest the breach and looked at the city with the expression of a woman who had spent years being told she was too dangerous for proximity to normal populations, standing in one of the largest cities on Earth and finding that the population was afraid of something else entirely. She found this refreshing in a way that reached her shoulders and released tension she had been holding since Kumogakure. Hinata and Hanabi came through together. Their feet touched the metropolis air in the same second. The rhythm they had built over a year of training in step, the timing automatic. Hanabi's hands were already in her modified Hyuga stance, adapted, rebuilt, designed for someone who trained without the cage bird seal's weight pressing down on every motion. Hinata's hands were at her sides. Her posture was open. She was looking at this world with eyes that had spent a year learning to look without apologizing for the act of looking. On GBS News, the anchor found her voice. Multiple individuals have emerged from the anomaly. She looked at her monitor. She looked at her co-anchor. Several of them appear to be teenagers. The co-anchor looked at the live feed showing Fu doing a second delighted loop above the skyline, her green wings catching sunlight. The one with the wings is definitely a teenager. The anchor looked at the camera. That does not make this better. Wonder Woman descended. She approached the group on the ground. Naruto had landed, his clan gathering around him in the loose configuration of people who trust each other enough to choose their own spacing. Diana came down with her hands visible and her posture communicating choice. She was choosing this conversation, and her choice carried the weight that 3 millennia of considered action puts into everything she decides to do. She addressed the women. She addressed them, looking past Naruto, finding their eyes, giving them the acknowledgement of being asked rather than being spoken for. Are you here by choice? Tamari looked at Diana. She took in the question, the genuine weight of it, the sincerity underneath the warrior's bearing, the real concern behind the asking. She made a small adjustment in how she held herself, the kind that happens when you expected condescension and found respect instead. My whole life, Tamari said, people have been asking me if I made choices, or if they were made for me. I always give the same answer. She looked at Naruto. Something moved between them. Something the audience had been building toward since the desert outside Suna, since the moment she stopped going back through the gate and started walking in the same direction. It was recognition. 2 people who had each made themselves formidable inside worlds that kept deciding their power was inconvenient, standing on the same side of a line in a sky that belonged to neither of them yet. I'm here, Tamari said. That's the answer. Diana held her gaze. She looked at Hinata, who met her eyes without looking away, which was a thing the girl from that academy corridor would have found impossible a year ago. She looked at Fu above them, still circling. She looked at the rest, Samui's professional stillness, Mabui's intellectual engagement, Yugito's azure flame held low and comfortable. They believe in you, Diana said to Naruto. They believe in what I'm building, Naruto said. There's a difference. I never asked anyone to believe in me. I'm offering something real and letting them decide if the real thing is worth having. He looked at Diana with the Rinnegan. Your league asks people to believe in you. You ask them to trust that you'll arrive in time, that you'll make the right call, that your judgment is worth their lives. That's a relationship built on faith. What I offer is built on force. Faith requires the other person to be good. Force only requires me to be stronger. And if you're wrong, Diana said. I'm the lead, Naruto said. I've been wrong before. I was wrong about a world full of people I thought were heroes. I'm never going to be wrong about this. Diana looked at him for a long time. She had held the lasso against his skin. She knew what she felt in that pull, the volume of it, the honesty of it. The grief so vast that it had become the foundation everything was built on. She put her sword back in its sheath. The motion was seen by every camera in range. Superman watched Diana sheath her blade and felt something complex about the moment. The recognition that she might be right about the longer strategy, the inability to make his own fist match it. Batman's jet wing had been gone for 6 hours when Naruto found him on the Daily Planet roof. The gold globe rotated behind Naruto's position, catching the evening sun, throwing golden light across the rooftop in patterns that moved with the globe's slow revolution. The city below was operating. Metropolis processed and continued. The particular urban resilience of a population that had learned to absorb the impossible and carry on. Batman landed the jet wing on the roof's edge and walked toward Naruto with a gait that communicated something new. He was carrying nothing. His hands were empty. The weight of the belt at his waist sat differently when the person wearing it knew what the person in front of them would do to every tool's relevance. "None of it works," Batman said. He sat down on the roof's edge, legs over the side, looking at the city below. It was a thing Batman did almost never. It was the posture of a man who had decided standing was wrong for what he was about to say. "Every contingency I have, every weapon in my inventory designed for Kryptonian level threats, the kryptonite, the red sun emitter, the sonic disruptors, the neural cascade mines." He looked at the city lights beginning to flicker on as evening approached. "The scan shows me what you have inside your chest." Naruto sat beside him. He sat down on the roof's edge because the body language was correct and because this was the first person in this universe who had come to him without a weapon first. "The seal on your sternum," Batman said. "Yes. You built it when you were 7 years old. 6, mostly. 7 for the final calibrations. I was working in my clan's archive, lamplight, stone floor, the kind of silence where you can hear yourself think at a level that makes the thinking better." Batman was silent for 8 seconds. The city moved below them. "Who hurt you?" The question landed on a frequency that had nothing to do with the rest of the conversation. It came from somewhere in Batman that was closer to the boy in the alley than to the man in the cave. The part of Bruce Wayne that had been a child when the world failed him, that had built everything he was on top of that failure. He asked it the way he always asked it, as one person who knew the shape of that wound, speaking to another. Naruto looked at him. The pause went on long enough that the globe completed a full rotation behind them. "Everyone," Naruto said. "And then I decided it was my turn." "That's the wound staying open and calling itself direction," Batman said. "I know," Naruto said. The words carried something between grief and acceptance, something that lived in the country where those two things shared a border and pressed against each other and produced a third thing without a name. He stood up. He looked at Metropolis below, 12 million lives visible as lights, as movement, as the particular energy that large populations generate simply by existing. "I'm going to be a better hero than Superman," he said. "I'm going to protect more people with less failure. That is what this planet gets under me. That is the offer." He looked at the skyline. The League can accept it, or it can become the League that tried to stop the person who came to make things right. He looked at Batman. "You're the smartest person in this room. You already know what the math says." Batman said nothing. He was looking at the city and running the math that Naruto said he already knew and finding that it produced the same answer on every pass. "What happens to the League?" Batman asked. "Whatever they decide," Naruto said. "I'm here to become the one who makes them optional. Their choice about what to do with optional is theirs." He lifted off the building. The inner sun's glow illuminated the Daily Planet's gold globe from below as he rose. Batman watched him go. He sat on the roof for a long time after. He looked at the city. He ran the math. He got the same answer. He filed it under, ongoing. Clark Kent went to Lois Lane. He found her at her desk. She was writing because Lois Lane worked in crises the way other people hid from them, and he sat down across from her without the cape, shirt untucked, tie gone, looking like a man who had been in a fight and knew he was going back to one. She looked at him. She had seen this expression before Doomsday, before the Imperiex War, before every fight he had entered knowing he might lose and going anyway. Don't, she said. I have to, he said. He is not trying to destroy the planet, she said. She turned her monitor toward him. The research, the data, the identity confirmation. Clark Kent of Earth Prime, the crisis records, the League archive entries. He is trying to own it. There's a difference. A small one, Clark said. Enough of one, she said. Enough that he broke every window in Metropolis and left every person inside them unharmed. Enough that he set Flash down on the sidewalk instead of through a building. Enough that he could have killed every member of the League in the first exchange and instead sat in the air and told them to go get reinforcements. Clark was still. He was a boy, Clark said. His voice carried something heavy. He was a boy who watched everything disappear. His world, his family, his future. And we, the League, the heroes before us, we put him in a box. Yes, Lois said. That doesn't justify what he's doing. Maybe it does and maybe it doesn't, Lois said, but understanding it is the first step towards something other than another fight you cannot win. Clark looked at his hands. He looked at the window. He looked at the city. If I don't fight him, he said, what message does that send? That you know the difference between winning a fight and solving a problem, Lois said. He looked at her for a long time. She looked back. They had been together long enough that some conversations happened in the space between the words rather than in the words themselves. He stood up. He straightened his shirt. He buttoned it over the suit. I'll be back, he said. I know, she said. She watched him go. She turned back to her desk. She opened a new file and typed the headline. The boy who lost everything. Superman found Naruto above the bay. He came alone. He had told the League to stand down. A decision delivered in the voice he used when the matter was final. This was personal in a way that League protocols had zero category for. Naruto was floating above the water at 50 meters. He had been watching the whale migration below the surface. A pod of grays moving through the deep channel, their communications visible to his X-ray vision as patterns of air in their massive lungs. He heard Clark coming from 4 kilometers out. You're back, Naruto said. He kept watching the whales. Without the team. This isn't about the team, Clark said. He was wearing the suit. He was hovering 10 meters from Naruto with his fists at his sides and the expression he wore when every alternative had been examined and discarded. I know who you are. I know what happened to you. I know about Earth Prime. Naruto went still. I know about Lori, Clark said. I know about Jerry and Naomi Kent. I know about the crisis, about what my predecessors did to you after. About the Paradise Dimension. Naruto's aura cycled at resting output. His expression did not change. He was listening with the particular quality of a person hearing their own stories spoken by someone else for the first time. I'm sorry, Clark said. I can't tell you it was right. I can't justify what they did. They were afraid of you, and they made that fear your punishment, and that was wrong. The bay moved below them. The wind carried salt. But this isn't the answer. Clark said, taking a world, even if you protect it, even if you do it perfectly, taking a world is not the answer to having yours taken. It doesn't close that wound. I know you know that. I know, Naruto said. The words came out at a volume and in a register that carried nothing of the God performance or the entitled teenager or the world breaker. They came out as the words of a person who has thought about something for years and arrived at a conclusion that hurts them and holds it anyway. I know it doesn't close it. I stopped believing it would close it a long time ago. He turned to face Clark. The Renegade met the Kryptonian Blue, the 2 strongest beings the sky had ever held, face to face, with the honesty pressing down on both of them. But it gives me somewhere to put the power, Naruto said. And the power needs somewhere to go. If it doesn't go into building something, it goes into destroying everything. I tried empty. Empty is worse. Clark was silent. The silence had the quality of a man who has heard something true and has to sit with it. I'm not going to stop, Naruto said. But I am going to listen to you make the argument for why I should, because you're the closest thing to real I've found in this universe. Clark looked at him. You could work with us. I tried working with heroes, Naruto said. I know how that ends. I read the comics. I lived the sequel. He raised his right fist. The solar storage seal blazed gold. The inner sun cycled from resting to active. The Rinnegan opened its full configuration, 6 paths, pulsing. "I don't want to fight you," Clark said. "I genuinely do not want to fight you." "Then don't," Naruto said. "But I am going to move forward. If you are standing in front of me when I do, you have to decide what that means." Clark stepped forward. He moved. He was going to fight. His body made the decision before his conscious mind finished the sentence, because Clark Kent was built to fight for things, even when every calculation said stopping was the smarter choice. It was his best quality. It was what separated Superman from every other Kryptonian who had ever existed. He charged. This fight was different from every fight before it. This was what happened when two people with the same power source and the same refusal to yield met above open water with everything, and the understanding that only one was coming out of it standing. Clark opened at maximum. Every Kryptonian ability in concert, the creative integration of speed and strength and heat and cold and flight that a lifetime of refinement had produced. He fought the way he fought Darkseid. He used the water below as a weapon, diving through it at speed, using the denser medium to build momentum, coming up beneath Naruto with force amplified by the resistance. He combined heat vision angles with physical strikes in sequences that found gaps in timing, that exploited the half seconds between Naruto's responses to create openings. Naruto fought back. He met Clark's speed with his own, Kryptonian velocity against Kryptonian velocity, two bodies at fractions of light speed, in exchanges that produced shockwaves across the bay with every contact. The water below churned in a constant state of disruption, waves expanding from each exchange in rings that hit the harbor walls and bounced back. Fish fled at maximum velocity. The whale pod dove for the deepest water available. The infinite mass punch met Superman's solar-charged right cross. The impacts produced sounds that were felt in the bones of everyone within 8 kilometers. The pressure waves generated weather. A sustained wind from the direction of the bay that blew through the financial district and turned umbrellas inside out and pushed people sideways on their feet. Superman landed clean hits. They were real. They moved Naruto. His body displaced by the force, his aura flickering for a half second at each impact point before the inner sun restabilized. Clark was good. Clark was genuinely, formidably, beautifully good at this. The gap was real and significant, but it was being navigated by someone who knew how to fight at a level that made the gap feel narrower than its measurements suggested. They traded for 4 minutes. In 4 minutes above the bay, they hit each other 237 times. Each impact was its own event. The cameras that could track it recorded what they could. Most of it was beyond recording. In the 4th minute, Naruto shifted. Universal Sage Mode. The aura went past what it had been. The white beyond white of nature energy integration layered on top of the inner sun and the 9-tailed beasts and the Rinnegan, all 4 systems climbing to maximum output simultaneously. The air around him changed composition. The next punch that hit Superman was different. Every punch before had the quality of a fight. This one had the quality of something ending. It carried the full weight of the power differential that had existed the entire time and had been expressed at partial output until this moment. Clark took the hit in the center of his chest and flew backward and hit the water surface at hypersonic speed, and the bay opened beneath him in a crater of displaced ocean that showed the harbor floor for a full second before the water crashed back. He came back up. He was slower. His suit was torn across the chest. He charged again. Naruto's fist met him. Clark stayed up. He came forward. He took the hit and stayed up and came forward again and took the next one and stayed up. Naruto looked at him with something that moved across his face. Respect that was complicated, real, and carrying the full weight of recognition. This man kept getting up. He kept getting up because getting up was who he was, because stopping required him to be someone else, because Clark Kent from Smallville had never learned the word yield and was never going to. "You don't know how to stop," Naruto said, "even when you should." "Never have," Clark said. His voice was steady, blood at the corner of his mouth, hands still in fists. Still here, Naruto looked at him for a long moment. He was measuring something that his instruments and his Rinnegan were irrelevant to. Something that could only be measured by one person who had been failed by heroes, looking at another person who refused to fail at being one, and finding both things true at the same time. "You're real," Naruto said. "I said that. I meant it." He lowered his fist. He did not hit Clark again. The stopping carried its own weight, an acknowledgement that cost something to give, because acknowledging Clark's reality meant the universe was more complicated than the narrative Naruto had built to carry his grief. "I'm not going to kill you," Naruto said. "I'm not going to imprison you. I'm not going to put you in a pocket dimension and make you watch a universe you can't touch." Clark was breathing hard. He was hearing the words and hearing what was behind them. The reference to what had been done to a boy named Clark Kent from Earth Prime by people who wore the same symbol. "I'm going to let you keep being Superman," Naruto said, "because someone should be, because this world needs someone who never stops getting up." He looked at the bay. He looked at the city beyond it. "I just need it to also have me." Clark stood in the air above the disrupted water. He stood there for a long time after Naruto turned south and flew. Lois's voice came in his earpiece. "Clark, I have the article." "Run it," he said. The broadcast went live at sunset. Naruto stood above the metropolis skyline with the day's last light at his back and the breach still open behind him, and Mabui's transit arrays interfacing with the city's communication infrastructure. She had spent 12 hours learning the DC Universe's broadcast architecture, found it elegant in reach, wasteful in routing, and rebuilt the parts she needed into something that would carry a signal to every frequency on the planet simultaneously, every screen on Earth, every radio, every connected device. He looked at the camera Mabui had positioned. He was lit from behind by the sunset. The Renegade's purple light gave his irises a quality that sat somewhere between human and something beyond. He spoke. He told them everything. Earth Prime, the world that was real, that was home. That was a place where Superman was a comic book character, and Clark Kent was a boy who had a family and a girlfriend and a future. He told them about the crisis, the antimatter wall, the end of everything, the 11 minutes of being Superman before the multiverse decided his reality was a rough draft. He told them about the paradise dimension, years watching through a wall, watching heroes make things worse and call it duty. He told them about the flashes and the speed force and the armor and the fights and the way every person in that universe decided he was the monster before he finished grieving. He told them about Konoha, about being 6 years old in the dirt, about standing up, about what he built after. He told it in his voice, entitled, self-righteous, and carrying underneath every word the absolute honesty of someone who has decided the world gets the full story, including the parts that make him look like the villain, because those parts are still true. "I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy," he said. "I'm telling you this because you have a right to know who it is that is taking your world. You have a right to know that I am not a villain who fell out of the sky without reason. I am a consequence. I am what you get when you take a boy who was supposed to be a hero and you use him as a warning, and then you let him go." He looked at the camera he knew Lois was watching through. "I'm going to do better than every hero who came before me. I'm going to be everywhere. I'm going to be faster than every disaster. I'm going to be stronger than every threat. I'm going to protect this planet the way it was supposed to be protected, without exceptions, without acceptable losses, without anyone getting a vote on which lives are worth the effort, the pause, the right length. In exchange, I ask one thing from everyone on this planet." His eyes were steady on the lens. The Renegade posed once. "Accept that I am here." Mabui cut the feed. Every screen returned to regular programming. Every news anchor on every channel in every language immediately began speaking in the register of people who have received a very large amount of information and have processed approximately 12% of it. In the American Midwest, a man named David, who had been following superhero news since his first Superman comic at age 9, sat in front of his television and said to his wife, "He's just a kid." His wife said, "He's a kid who can end everything." David said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Those are the same sentence." In a government situation room, 7 officials who had been arguing about response protocols for 3 hours went silent when the analysis arrived. The power signature exceeded every nuclear payload in the global arsenal by a factor that made the comparison meaningless. One official said, "We send a representative." Another said, "Who volunteers for that?" The room stayed silent for a full minute. In Tokyo, a 12-year-old named Yuki, who had watched the entire broadcast live on a phone too small for the scale of what it was showing, sent a message to her best friend. The message said, "I think I understand why he's angry. I think I would be angry too." Her friend wrote back, "Is it bad that I hope he's telling the truth about protecting everyone?" Yuki wrote, "I don't think that's bad. 3 days after the broadcast, the meeting happened. Naruto sent the request through Batman, delivered to the Jetwing's encrypted channel, because Batman would carry the communication without adding opinion. Batman delivered it. He delivered it with the particular expression of a man who has been thinking about something for 3 days and has arrived at a conclusion he finds distasteful and unavoidable. The Hall of Justice. The circular table. Every active league member who chose to attend, seated around its circumference. Naruto walked through the front door at the agreed time. Alone, his clan elsewhere in the city, dispersed into the rhythms of a new world. He sat down at the table and looked at the assembled heroes. He laid out the terms. He spoke them in sequence, and the story watches each one land. He would be Earth's primary protector. When a threat exceeded the League's capacity, he would handle it. While he handled it, the League focused on civilian protection. Superman's face held steady. The muscle in his jaw moved once. The League retained full autonomy for everything below that threshold. He had zero interest in managing their operations. Batman's eyes were doing work behind the stillness. He would never govern. Zero interest in politics, legislation, or bureaucracy. He was interested in threats. Everything else belonged to the people already handling it. Green Lantern exchanged a look with Flash. His clan operated as a secondary force, capable individuals with real power, handling what fell between categories. Diana looked at the table. She looked at her hands on its surface. She looked up. In exchange, public acknowledgement. On record. Zero further attempts to remove or imprison him. "And if we disagree?" Hal Jordan asked. "Then you and I have a longer conversation," Naruto said. "And I win that conversation." Superman spoke. "You said you're going to be everywhere, faster than every disaster, stronger than every threat. Yes. And when you're wrong? When you make a call that costs lives?" The question sat in the room. Everyone at the table was watching his face for the answer. "Then I live with it," Naruto said. "The same way you live with yours." Clark looked at him. "I'm held accountable for mine." "By whom?" Naruto said. Clark opened his mouth. The words, "by the people, by the government, by the public trust," died because every single one was a half-truth, and both of them knew it. "Exactly," Naruto said. Nothing triumphant in the word. You hold yourself accountable. That's the only accountability that works for someone at our level. Everything else is theater. I hold myself to the same standard, higher, because I'm harder to stop and I know it, and that makes every error my fault by a larger margin. Diana said, "You believe that?" "Yes," Naruto said. "Then maybe there is a version of this that works," she said. She looked at Clark. Clark looked at the table. He looked at the terms. He looked at the room, the weight they were all carrying, the knowledge that the alternative had been tested and their entire combined force found insufficient. He signed. He signed because the alternative was the crater version, and 7 billion people were worth more than the ideological purity of refusing. He signed because Lois was right, that the difference between destroying and owning mattered. He signed because a 12-year-old in Tokyo hoped the boy in the sky was telling the truth. And Clark Kent was the kind of person who made decisions with that 12-year-old in mind. Diana signed because she had held truth against his skin and knew what she knew. Batman signed because the math said the same thing every time, and he had never let sentiment override mathematics when lives were on the table. The League signed the covenant. On the street outside, a photographer for the Metropolis Star got the image through the window. The assembled League and a boy in orange and black at the table, pen on paper. The image ran on every front page the next morning. That evening, the sky above Metropolis carried its last event. Naruto returned to the bay. The breach hung above the water, 20 meters of dimensional wound, still open. still anchored, still showing the otherworld sky. His clan was gathered on the waterfront, finding each other in the evening air, settling into the proximity that felt correct for what was coming. He sat in the air, cross-legged, above the water. He closed his eyes and reached into the seal network, past the 8 tails of space, past the 7 tails, past 6 other ancient beings, and found the first, the oldest, the one who had been there since the beginning. "It's time," he said. Inside the seal space, Kurama opened one enormous red eye. He had been listening. The 9 tails heard everything through the network, every exchange, every fight, every speech. He had been sitting with his chin on his crossed paws through the entirety of it, keeping his commentary to himself, choosing silence with a restraint he would describe as deeply uncharacteristic and deeply intentional. "The world here is different," Naruto said. "There is no sage of 6 paths. There are no hidden villages waiting to seal you the moment you appear. I made a promise." Kurama's 9 tails shifted behind him, the fox equivalent of straightening before a moment that mattered. "I'm keeping it." 9 tails extraction reverse. He activated the inverted Uzumaki grade removal array, the only time he had ever turned the extraction seal inward. The process began in his chest, the inner sun's framework opening a channel, the seal network creating a pathway from Kurama's storage space to the physical world through Naruto's body as the bridge. The process took 15 minutes. Kurama was the largest and the oldest. His chakra filled the extraction channel the way an ocean fills a riverbed. Complete, overwhelming, unstoppable once the flow began. Naruto held the pathway open and felt the fox pass through him in layers. When it was done, Kurama stood in the physical world, 9 tails spreading across 2 kilometers of open water, fur the color of sunset catching the evening light, eyes like red moons. He was the largest living being anyone in Metropolis had ever seen. Bigger than the buildings on the waterfront, bigger than the frozen waves still standing in the harbor, bigger than anything this universe had a category for. Emergency alerts went off in every borough simultaneously. Naruto floated in front of him, small against the fox, a person against a mountain, a boy against a millennium. "You're free," he said. Kurama looked down at him. His enormous eye carried something in its depth, something adjacent to gratitude, but refusing the name, because Kurama had too much history with gratitude being used as a chain. What he felt was the emotion of someone who was promised something impossible and is standing inside the fulfilled promise. "Where do I go?" Kurama asked. His voice was so large it rattled windows on the waterfront. "Anywhere," Naruto said. "That's the point." Kurama looked at the ocean. He looked at the sky. He looked at the breach, the door back to the world where he was born, where mountains knew the sound of him, where the sage of 6 paths had created him and called him a gift. He looked at all of it, and he took his time because for the first time in 1,000 years, the looking was his own choice. "I'll stay nearby," he said. "For now." "For now is enough," Naruto said. Kurama lowered himself into the bay. The water rose around his massive form, displaced, accommodating, finding new levels. In 10 seconds, he was beneath the surface. The only evidence was the orange glow of his chakra, visible through 40 meters of water. Warm light moving south, finding the deep channel, heading toward open ocean, going wherever Kurama decided, because the decision was his and had never been his before. On the harbor ferry, Thomas, the same sailor who had watched the glass fall that morning, stood at the rail and watched an orange glow the length of a city block pass beneath his vessel. He crossed himself. He uncrossed himself. He crossed himself again because he had spent his whole life believing in things larger than himself, and this was the first time one had passed close enough to count. "God," he said to the passenger beside him. "I don't think so," the passenger said, "but close." The emergency alerts went silent as the glow moved south. The bay settled. From somewhere above, from an altitude beyond the atmosphere, from a distance that should have been beyond detection range, something watched. The instruments on Apocalypse had registered the breach the moment it opened. They had tracked the power signature. They had measured it against every recorded value in Darkseid's archives and produced a result that made the operator send the reading directly to the throne room rather than through channels. Darkseid looked at the reading. He pulled the observation relay and watched. For 60 seconds, the boy standing at the water's edge with his people around him and his signature reading at values that made the numbers stop meaning anything useful. He said one thing. He said it to the empty throne room in a voice that carried zero surprise and something much closer to recognition. Interesting. Then he closed the relay. He sat in his throne. He did not dispatch forces. He sat with the information, the way he sat with all information, with the particular weight of a being who had spent an eternity looking for the anti-life equation and had just seen something his instruments refused to categorize and his intuition refused to dismiss. The implications sat in the room like heat. Below, far below, Naruto landed on the waterfront. His clan was behind him. He stood facing the bay with the last of the sunset on the water and the breach above still anchored. Tamari walked up beside him. She stood at his left shoulder, the position she had been occupying in different configurations since the desert, since the wall, since the moment she stopped walking backward and started walking forward. She looked at the water. She looked at the fading orange glow heading for open ocean. "He'll come back," she said. "He said he would," Naruto said. "Good enough," she said. The pause between them held everything it needed to hold without a single word being added. What lived there had been building since sand and treaty complications and a conversation about how interesting things complicate everything. The pause was brief and it contained everything. He turned around. His clan was there. All of them. Fu sitting on a concrete pylon at the water's edge, wings folded, watching the sky go through its colors with appreciation and the absence of urgency. Samui and Mabui standing together over a projected map of the city, already identifying infrastructure, resource distribution, communication hubs, already building. Yugito with her azure flame cycling low, standing in the evening air with a posture that communicated something she had been looking for and had found. A place where what she was made her valuable rather than dangerous. Hinata and Hanabi side by side on the harbor wall. Hanabi interrogating the layout with her systematic energy. Hinata looking at the breach above them with eyes that carried forward from a corridor where 4 words changed the shape of her understanding of protection and who she could become underneath it. He looked at all of them. "We build here," he said. "This is the world. We have it. Everything from now is what we make of it." Nobody spoke. The moment required nothing else. 8 people at the edge of a bay, in a city that knew their names, in a world that had signed the covenant, standing in the last light of the first day of something entirely new. He turned back to the bay. He looked at the breach above him, still open, still glowing at its edges, still showing the shinobi world's sky through its window. He could close it. The Rinnegan could seal it as cleanly as it had opened it. He looked at it for a long time. Dimensional anchor, sustained. He fed the technique fresh energy. The breach's edges blazed brighter for a moment and then settled into a steady glow, reinforced, stabilized, anchored permanently. He was keeping it open. The reason lived in the space between one breath and the next. His entire life had been a story about what happens when doors close on people. He was never going to close a door. He floated above the bay. The inner sun hummed through his sternum, the steady pulse of a power source that had been running since he was 7, and would run until the last atom of his body came apart, which was a timeline his calculations could find zero into. The Rinnegan read the city. 12 million lives, each one a point of warmth in his perception, each one a person going about their evening in a city that had experienced its most significant week and was already finding the shape of the next. The yellow sun was below the horizon, but its radiation still reached him, scattered through the atmosphere, reflected off the moon, stored in the inner sun's matrix, at levels that grew with every passing second. The theoretical ceiling of a Kryptonian under a yellow sun was something none had ever reached, because the sun kept giving more. Naruto was the exception. His cells kept expanding their capacity. The ceiling kept receding above him. He was going to keep getting stronger. He was going to keep building. He was going to keep every promise, to Kurama, to his clan, to the 12-year-old in Tokyo, to the covenant signed with a league that would learn to share its sky. He took a breath. The evening air tasted like ocean, and the particular energy of a city alive and awake and deciding what it thought about something new. He breathed it in and held it and let it out. The first star appeared above the eastern horizon, then the second. The sky above Metropolis filled with points of light, the universe showing itself, vast and full of things that had never met him yet. He rose into it. "It's prime time," he said. To the open sky and the open breach in the city below, and the ocean where an ancient fox was swimming free, and the woman at the waterfront who had stopped walking backward, and the 7 billion people who were going to learn his name, and the universe that had tried for 2 lifetimes to write him as the villain, and failed both times. He was still rising. The air thinned around him. The stars grew brighter. The city shrank below into a grid of golden light. "I've been saving that one." He rose, and the breach stayed open behind him, and the inner sun ran, and the Renegade watched everything. And below him the world had decided, through covenant, through force, through the weight of a person who had been told he was expendable by 2 different universes and answered both with the same word, that the boy in the sky was something they were going to learn to live with. And below, standing at the edge of the water in the last of the evening light, Tamari looked up at the rising figure until he was a point of white among the stars, indistinguishable from them at that distance, and brighter than all of them from any other, and said nothing, and smiled, and waited for him to come back down. He always did. That was the thing the stories about Superboy-Prime had never understood, the thing every comic and every universe that tried to write him as the monster had missed entirely. The power went up, but the boy came home. The breach glowed above the bay. 2 worlds, visible to each other through a window that would stay open for as long as the person who opened it drew breath. Somewhere in the deep water off the coast, an orange glow moved south, free. Somewhere in a government situation room, officials were writing a letter addressed to the most powerful being on the planet and using words they had never been trained to use. Somewhere in Tokyo, a girl was reading Lois Lane's article and finding that the anger made sense and the protection made sense, and the combination was something she would think about for a very long time. Somewhere on the Daily Planet roof, Batman stood alone and ran the math one final time and got the same answer and filed it and went home. And above it all, above the city, above the covenant, above the bay and the breach and the clan and the whale migration resuming in the deep channel, Uzumaki Naruto rose into a sky that belonged to him now, carrying the inner sun in his chest and the Renegade in his eyes and the memory of a dead world in his cells and the decision he made at Tages 6 in his bones. The boy who stood up in the dirt of Konoha, the boy who punched through a wall between realities. The boy who took a plane and promised to protect it and meant every word and had the power to keep every promise and intended to prove it every single day for as long as the universe kept spinning beneath him. He rose and the world watched, and the world accepted, and the stars received him, and the final light of his aura burned above the metropolis skyline like a second sun that had decided to stay. And below, everyone who saw it understood that the story had ended, the only way it was ever going to end, with him above everything and everything below, learning to live with that truth, and the door behind him open for anyone brave enough to follow.
Thanks for watching this insane full story. Naruto Prime owning everything. If you got hyped, smash subscribe for more badass crossovers. Drop a like and comment your favorite "Did he just say that" moment. More fire coming. Stay legendary.